Hey everyone, we're gonna start, and I know some people mentioned that they are looking for parking and things like that, so people will still be trickling in, but we're gonna go ahead and start, and just want to say thank you to everyone for being here today on a Saturday. I believe that this training is really important. It is timely and so interesting. We're on an email blast for several different ministries, and actually this week we got an email notification for another church that's doing something similar. So we do feel that this is timely, and it is good that we are prepared for different things that may happen. And we're just so excited to have our brother Albert Hugo here to do the training for us today. He and his wife Pia are just amazing pillars here at our church, Radiance International. They've been with us for these last years. 3 years. And we just love them so much. I've known Pia actually many, many years. So running in revival circles, but just redigging the wells for revival here in Los Angeles. But this is so important. And I know Albert's going to share so much about what he's done and the training he's done in Asia, in the Philippines, but I'm going to read his bio, because I want you to know who is speaking to us today. He's so qualified. Albert Hugo has been a firefighter for both Ventura County and Los Angeles County fire departments for almost 30 years. You look, well then, I don't know when you started, 15? Albert has held the ranks of firefighter, engineer, apparatus operator, fire inspector, and currently film unit inspector. And we've had lunch with him when he was in the middle of his duty on his day, and he came with his uniform and came with his truck, and it's really cool to see. He's legit. He's awesome. And Albert has participated in various programs such as Rescue Youth Program, Explorer Program. Let me describe it. Rescue Youth Program is a mentoring program for at-risk middle schoolers. Explorer Program is a program for young people interested in career in firefighting. Battalion Driving Instructor, which is a fire truck driving instructor. So, wow, he's done so much. Battalion Training Instructor, an instructor who trains firefighters on how to operate new equipment and apply new firefighting techniques. So he's also a CPR instructor and CERT instructor, which is Community Emergency Response Training. Albert is also a CPR and basic life support instructor with the American Heart Association. So he's going to bring some of these skills and his expertise to share with us today. And so for us who are in the room, we're going to just have a lot of hands-on training, and we're also recording this so that those who are not here with us today can get these life-saving skills down in their toolbox, because we may need it. It could be an earthquake, it could be fire, it could be things that are happening, which happens across our city these days, and we never wish for it to happen. But there could be a shooting, there could be things that happen where wound care is needed, and if we happen to be there, how amazing it is if we could save a life. We could pray for people, and we could also do something in the natural to bring life back to people. So this is the whole purpose of why we asked Albert to share. And if we could just give him a applause for his time. Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Pia, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Sharon. So I believe that this is actually what the Lord is doing, because Pastor Sharon had asked me a couple times, and it just wasn't the right time to do this. And it's no coincidence that January 17th will mark 30 years since the Northridge earthquake. So think about that. That was a 6.7 earthquake that some of you weren't even born yet. So it's a matter of time, and what we're trained is the next significant seismic event here in Southern California can range anywhere from 7 to 8 plus. So we're overdue, so to speak, and the training we receive is about preparing. When I go out there and I do training here, I train CERT, for those of you that might or might not know it. It's a 24-hour course that trains regular people how to be prepared how to render care and assistance to their family members or their neighbors, or sometimes they're at work, because these incidents happen anywhere. We can't predict them. So when we do this in the Philippines, this CERT training is 24 hours. So there's no way I could incorporate everything. So I picked like really applicable topics. And my goal here is, like, when you go to Costco and they give you a little sample of something, they really want to entice you to buy the whole product. So this is my goal, is to give you an inkling of potentially something that you might want to expand your knowledge on. And some of you might be healthcare professionals. I don't know everybody here or their background. So some of this might be redundant, but some of this is going to be new stuff. So it's going to be a series of 3 PowerPoints interlaced with videos. So this is a smaller group. So if you really have a question, I was going to leave it at the end of every PowerPoint, and then we can incorporate it. And at the conclusion of our training, towards the end of it, we have the CPR mannequins, we have bleeding control, we're going to talk about shock, all these things that I cover. My goal is to get everybody to get hands-on. So I know a lot of you came with a family member, a spouse, or whatnot. When that comes, we're just going to break into people that don't know each other, preferably, because it may happen when you're at work, you're going to the grocery store, and you're going to be assisting somebody that you don't even know. So we're going to start, and like the title of my PowerPoint says, it's a matter of it's not a matter of if, but when, because we really don't know when this thing can happen. So we're talking about disasters, and if you look that up, it'll tell you that there are disruptions to the functioning of a community that exceed its capacity to cope with its resources. Everybody can have a different definition of disasters. For somebody, it might be missing their latest K-pop drama. I don't know. You know, that might be a disaster to somebody, but there's different interpretations of what a disaster can be. But basically, there's things that nobody can predict in most cases, and if we're not planned for it, it can catch us completely off guard. It can happen in the workplace, it can happen at church, it can happen on your route to somewhere, in high school, in your home, or in your car. So we really don't know when this can happen. So the thing is that we want to be prepared as much as we can in whatever setting that we may be in, because we may not be at home where we have all our prepared stuff and whatnot. So this is just something to keep you thinking. If it happens at work, and say you live somewhere in Santa Cruz where my wife and I live, and we're at church, how can I get home not in the same route where there's tunnels, potentially overpasses of freeways? So this is to get you to think that if you're caught somewhere far from home, how can you get home in areas that you may not have access to? So just something to keep in mind. So this is just a fictional video of a potential seismic event in Southern California. And it's just to give you an idea of some of the damage we may sustain. This is actually kind of subdued. So what we're being told that it could be much more significant than this. So Stephen, do you play that? Yeah, there we go, thanks.
It's a sunny morning in Southern California. Across the region, 7.5 million people are busy at work. Several 100,000 of them are commuting to jobs in different counties, far from where they live. Over 200,000 commuters work and reside on opposite sides of the San Andreas Fault. Today, these families and many others across the region will be separated. 1,800 people will die. 53,000 people will be injured. And $213 billion in damage will occur. It's 10 a.m. The largest earthquake to hit Southern California in modern times has just begun. Some people react appropriately, others don't. In the intense shaking, nearly 1,500 buildings collapse. Infrastructure is severely compromised, and 300,000 buildings suffer significant damage. The rupture travels 200 miles northwest along the San Andreas Fault, violent shaking lasting as long as 2 minutes in some areas. Finally, the earthquake is over. Many of the lifelines of Southern California have been disrupted. A large number of people are trapped in collapsed buildings. Over 1,600 fires start, some turning into super conflagrations. Millions of people are trying to use their phones, causing the system to become overloaded. In the months ahead, there will be tens of thousands of aftershocks. Residents will struggle to recover from the earthquake. There will be no water for weeks or months, and no electricity. Traveling from point to point within the city will be extremely difficult, and 255,000 people will be displaced from their homes. We are all in this together. We will suffer the consequences if we don't do our part right now. How quickly life gets back to normal after this disaster is up to you and those around you. Your level of personal preparedness will determine your quality of life after the quake. It's a good idea to have a fire extinguisher, a first aid kit, and enough water for each person in your household to have at least 1 gallon of water a day for 3 days. Have an emergency plan. Decide now where you will meet your family after an earthquake. Make sure there's a person out of town you can contact to let your loved ones know that you're okay. Homeowners should be sure to bolt their house to its foundation. Consider whether earthquake insurance makes sense for you as part of your financial plan. Even if you're not a homeowner, you can secure your personal possessions against earthquake damage. Preparedness is not only for the home, but also for business. Be sure that your company has emergency plans for a major earthquake. Empower yourself and your family. Be prepared.
So that was a depiction of something much less than what we're being trained that will potentially hit this area. So just think of the damage for those of us that were around in Northridge. It was pretty significant. And it disrupted a lot. There was like 50-something people that died, and the estimates were in the billions of loss. You know, not just property damage, but infrastructure and all that. So this is where we live. We live in Southern California. So we haven't had any significant event in quite a while. So that just, not to scare you, that's just to give you an idea of what we might be encountering. So like I talked to you, that you want to be prepared not just in the home, you want to be prepared as much as possible. Maybe have something in your car. If you work somewhere, you want to be prepared in the event that happens in your workplace. What do we do to prepare for a disaster? Every area that we live in, and we live in a diverse area. If you live in the Antelope Valley, you're subjected to flash floods. If you live in downtown LA, you might be living in a high rise. There's different concerns there. So depending on where you live, if you live somewhere near Carson or the refinery areas, it could be explosion or something significant that's in the air. So depending on where you live or where you work, that you want to be taking into account those different things. Weather patterns, just specific things that might be for that general area that some of us don't have to encounter because we don't live in those regions, nor do we work there. So this is a handout. It basically that I think everyone had access to. If you didn't, you could get one from my wife. All those stuff is free, and it's just telling you what to do to prepare your home. If it makes sense and you own your home, you might want to consider you bolting the foundation down. Do you know how to shut off your gas? Maybe some of you do, but there's a specific way to do it. So we're going to go over that, and we're going to have hands-on to do that, how to shut your electricity off. One of the things that they ingrain in us when we get trained in the fire department is what they call situational awareness. What does that mean? be aware of your surroundings. When my wife and I started dating, she said, "Why do you always want to sit down facing the entrance to the restaurant?" I didn't even think about it. It's just something that was ingrained in us as we started in the academy. Where are you going into? How do you get out? Power goes out. How can you make your way out? Looking for exits and seeing things, looking at the extinguishers. Do they look like they've been serviced and whatnot? These things I don't even think about. And she thought it was funny. It was just something that was just ingrained in me because of the training I received. So what can we do? We can reduce the impact of any kind of significant seismic event in your home by a few things. So some of us may have the means to purchase some of these items or whatnot. Some of us maybe not. But you can make simple adjustments to your home, relocating glass or mirrors that might be near an exit, anchoring or bolting down some heavy furniture. If you live in a multi-story unit and you have a means to get out, it might be, buying one of those collapsible ladders that you can throw over the window. If maybe grandma who has mobility issues is on the second floor, maybe it's time to switch that setting and let's place her on the first floor. Little simple things, little simple adjustments that you can implement in your home that can make a significant impact in the event something does occur. Electrical hazards, so these are just some of the things you want to consider. What else can we do? So there's an acronym, there's going to be a lot of acronyms here. So if you forget them or whatnot, you'll have access to my email and I can send some of this stuff to you so that you can go over it. So lies is not a sin that the Lord tells us not to commit. In this case, lies applies to limiting the quality of stuff you have on hand. If you have some things in your garage and you haven't used them in a year or even worse, maybe it's time to get rid of it. It's taking up space. If it's a flammable or combustible kind of fluid, in the event something happens, it's just going to add to the potential combustion in your home. So maybe it's time to get rid of that. If we have things that potentially, if they get exposed to the air, let's limit it and let's isolate it somewhere else. If you can place it outside your garage, maybe in a little shed on the backyard, if that is something that applies to you. We talked about eliminating, but we're also going to separate. There's a thing called incompatibles, and a good example of this is ammonia and bleach. If they mix, they can make a very hazardous or even fatal gas that, if inhaled, can really put you down or even become fatal to you. So little things that we don't know, we want to look at that. So these are just some of the things that you can be aware of. And what do you have at home? Have you read the labels? Let's see what applies to that. So we talked about, which was shown in the video, about an emergency evacuation plan. It doesn't necessarily mean an evacuation plan because there's some kind of an earthquake. It could be a fire. It could be some some rioting happening in your area. And nowadays all these things apply, unfortunately. So we need to know that we have family members out of state or out of the area that you can contact, because if dad is up there in the Antelope Valley and you live in Santa Monica, he may not get to you for who knows how long. And you want to know if dad's okay, or you want to know if your kids are okay. So what will happen is cell phones are going to be inundated. So the ability to call out, good luck. But you have much more luck trying to text, or like some of you, I know our good friend Noel has a landline. Yeah, some people still have them. And when I got hired as a firefighter, it was a requirement that you needed to have at least a landline, and they did away with it, unfortunately. So you might have more luck with using a landline than your cell phone. But always keep in mind, maybe you can text, or maybe you could send something through email if you have access to that. Do you have transportation, different routes that we talked about? These things happen, but if you do a plan, practice. Just like ball players, whether football, basketball, they practice because when it's game day, you want to be able to do it. It has to become second nature. You don't want to be thinking about what you need to do. You hope that you already know. These are other essential items that you might want to consider keeping. You can have what they call a go bag, which is an emergency bag. It could be a backpack. It could be in a plastic case or whatnot. Then you could put some essential items that are in here. Do you have an out-of-state contact? Do you have cash? You may not have access to your ATM, and you may not have cash on hand. So how are you going to do, what are you going to do if you need to make a purchase? So a good idea to have some cash on hand. Important documents, passport, social security card. If you don't have digital copies, make physical copies and keep them in a designated area, in a safe box. You want to make sure that if you need to leave and you need to, get medical assistance or care when things are calmed down and you don't have your medical card or whatnot, that you have a means to prove that you're that person. Change of clothing, personal hygiene items. If there's an infant in your house, do you have infant items, diaper care, and things like that? Special needs for people that maybe you live with, or maybe it's grandma who lives not down the ways, and she has a wheelchair and whatnot. Do you have a means to provide a secondary wheelchair or a walker in the event something happens and grandma's not at home and she can't walk unassisted? So these are just things that you want to consider. We have pets. Do we have items for them to feed them, a leash or whatnot? So just a few things that you might want to consider. We talked about an emergency escape plan. Everybody should conduct it, whether you live in a small condo, you live in a large home, you have multiple family members. You want to know in the event there's maybe a fire in a particular area of your house, that you know how to get out, that everybody knows, that you check the windows. Can the windows open up? Even something as minor as closing your door, and you're going to see a video at the tail end of this particular PowerPoint, why even going to bed and closing your door can make it for you to survive in the event there's a fire or not. Because most people think that when there's fires that people succumb to being burnt. They succumb from inhaling smoke and toxic gases. The materials that make up our furniture, our carpeting, our petrochem materials, that when they burn hot, they burn fast, and they send and emit really harmful toxic gases. So closing your door can make a significant impact on if you can survive a particular fire in your house. There might be a situation, for example, somebody who lives in Carson and there's some kind of event with one of the petrochem refineries, and there's a thing called shelter in place. And that's why it's good to have access to a battery-operated radio or a hand-cranked radio, and you're hearing news and they're telling you, do not leave, shelter in place. What does that mean? You're going to buckle down. You're going to close all entrances, seal little crevices on your doors. If you have a chimney, you want to place plastic and whatnot so that you can stay in your home or wherever you're at, and then you could be protected from harmful gases and whatnot. It's also a good idea to have a disaster kit for at least a 3-day. That's what this training says. I think that you should prepare for at least 7 to 10, if possible. If all you can do is 3 days, hey, that's great. But you should have something in place. So this is a little example of what you want to do. You want to seal your door, your fan, your vents. If you have a chimney, duct tape is a great tool. You can use plastic bags or some kind of sheeting that you have from maybe a package from Amazon or whatnot. You want to seal all these potential areas where some gases or fumes can eventually make their way into your house if you have an event where you need to shelter in place. So you also make sure, you have no idea how many times we go on a fire and come to find out that they had smoke alarms, but they didn't have batteries. Or they didn't have, when they took it down because mom's cooking and there always seems to be smoke and it triggers that alarm. They took it down because it became a nuisance. I get it. Then maybe you have that smoke alarm a little too close to the area where she's cooking. But these are different, it gives you different ideas where you want to place your smoke alarms. You don't want to place them too close to the kitchen, but at least in the bedrooms and significant areas. And then garage, absolutely, because you never know. Sometimes those fires, the most fires occur inside the kitchen or in garage areas. A good investment, if some of you know a seismic or an earthquake valve, what that is, it's a little valve that it senses movement and it'll automatically shut off your gas. Funny that I went online, and actually I believe this is a picture of our old house. I was showing my wife, because I did this training before, and I took a picture. These have to be installed by a certified plumber, believe it or not. A plumber can install them. They're not that expensive, but just like anything else, buyer beware. There's some good ones and some ones not so good. If you purchase any kind of item or something like this that's a life safety item, look for the UL, Underwriter Laboratories mark. And what that tells you, that it's gone to stringent testing, that it meets a minimum requirement. So there's many products out there from different countries, you know, buyer beware, because if it's too cheap and you think you're getting a deal, you're really risking a lot. It won't be worth it. So it's something to consider. Food supplies. We're telling people to prepare in the event there's an earthquake. You're not going to see us from anywhere to 3 days to 2 weeks. Because if this next seismic event is significant enough, you're going to be on your own for a while. So you need to really understand what can you do, and we're going to cover some of these things that you can do so that you can help yourself. But what better way to minister, you know, the Lord's love to a neighbor who doesn't have a relationship with the Lord and you're rendering assistance? That's what P and I do when we go to the Philippines. We work with a ministry there that does this kind of work. The training I give them, they've incorporated. They send me pictures of responding to mudslides, traffic collisions, earthquakes, with some of the training that I get them, because 911, we're so blessed where we live that we have access to 911 in most cases fairly quickly. But these countries, third world countries, don't have that luxury. So this ministry does what they're called to do. They're helping people in their most dire need. Disaster go kits, like I talked about, like it says right here, you should prepare for minimum 3 days to 10 for food and water, basically a gallon per person. That seems like a lot, and it can be, because some of us are going to be severely challenged to be able to have that kind of quantity of water in the place where we live. But there's things that you can do and ways you can get water that some of us don't know. So we want to store water. You can actually buy kits that you can fill your bathtub, and you can have quite a bunch of gallons depending on how big your bathtub is. It's plastic, it goes in there, you fill it up. I'm guessing you can get anywhere from 30 to 70, 80 gallons depending on how big your bathtub is. And you can store water that way. There's different containers, and they come in all different sizes. You can get the smaller ones here. If you start to stock water up, make sure that you have a means to date it, because you want to rotate that water out. Eventually, stagnant water could potentially become harmful, but there's ways that you can make potentially harmful water a little more safe for you to drink. And that's by purifying. You can use bleach. So these are the ratios that if you wanted to make some water, you know, if you needed to use it, what are you going to do? But if you do have bleach, make sure that it's not scented. These are the percentages of concentration of bleach to water. And it doesn't take a whole lot, but if you can heat the water up and boil it, that's another means that you can do. You can buy tablets that purify water, but this is something that you can do because you may not have access to water that you know is good. And you might have to subject yourself to actually purifying some water that you have on hand. A lot of people don't know your water heater is a source of water. You have, and depending on the size of your water heater, you have access to 30 to 50 gallons inside there. That if you know how to get it out, yes, if there's metal in there, yes, there's ways that you can put maybe a coffee filter, maybe 2 of them as the water goes out. You can catch some of those potential decomposing elements that are inside that the water heater is made of. But hey, you can use maybe this water to wash your hands or whatnot, or if you purify it and then you're able to filter it even more. If you had to drink it, try to make it as safe as possible for you to be able to drink it. So here's a video that covers some of the stuff that we're talking, and this is the famous actress Pia Hugo.
You know, everyone knows we are living in tumultuous times, whether it's a worldwide pandemic or an earthquake, or how about a wildfire raging right in the next city. Never has there been a better time to be trained in disaster preparedness. As a church, we also need to be ready to provide assistance to whomever might need it, whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual. You know, my husband, he's been a firefighter for both the Ventura and the LA counties for about, actually more than 25 years. So we have put together a series of videos to help you situate yourselves so that you can be better prepared for that next catastrophe. Because let's face it, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch these videos. We hope you'll be blessed by them.
Hey, Albert.
Hey,
Good
Dennis,
to
how
see
you
you,
been?
man. Good to see you. It's been a while.
It's been a while.
Come on inside. Good to see you. So I really appreciate Albert coming over. You know, I've been trying to figure out with my family how to get a plan together. You know, in case there's a disaster or something. We have so many wildfires. So I just want to get like a plan together so that, you know, we could be safe. But, you know, I'm kind of clueless. Where do I start at?
I'm glad that you called me, Dennis, and I'm more than happy to help you. And like any kind of an emergency, whether it's a fire or an earthquake, let's start with your utilities: gas, electric, and water. Let's start with your gas.
Okay, that's good. Maybe you can even help me where to find it. I'm not even sure where to find it in this house. So
Okay, let's go
do
to
that.
the outside of your
Okay.
house. Okay, Dennis, this right here is your gas meter. Most gas meters are located exterior of the house, either in the rear of the house, sometimes in the front or the sides. Sometimes they're even underneath the house when the houses are older. The thing you want to look for is your feeder line. Your feeder line is this right here. As you can see, it goes from underground, it goes up, and you'll see a valve right here. This is in line. That means it's in line with the... So this is your gas meter. This is a prop. So the things that I want to also enforce with you guys is to remember when you're dealing with gas, you want to use the proper tool. There's different wrenches out there. This particular wrench is one that I recommend because it's made from a non-sparking material. So you don't want to hit metal with metal and potentially cause a spark when you're dealing with gas. Identifying your feeder line, this is the one that comes from underground and it goes up. This is your actual valve. As you can see, it runs in line with the plumbing here. To shut it off, these eyelets here would have to match, and it's going to actually bisect the plumbing. So when we want to shut this off, I'm going to place it in here with my tool, and I'm going to move it. Now it's shut off. It bisects that, and you see the eyelets are matching each other.
So Albert, if I'm having some type of a disaster or something and the pipe breaks and the water's coming out everywhere, how would I know where to shut off my water at my house? Can you show me?
Sure. There's potentially two ways you can shut your power off. Your house has this exterior here that would shut your water, just like the gas main. It runs in line with the water. To shut it off, you would turn it, and now it's bisecting it. So now this means that it's shut. But there's another valve that you should also know that brings the feeder main into your house, and I'll show you that one too.
So is this normally found in the front of my house? Is that where I would usually find it?
Either the front or the sides if you have it, but some houses don't have this.
Okay.
But it's a good idea to have because it's the quick shut off. So Dennis, this is the exterior valve that you could shut the water coming into your house from the main water feeder line.
Okay.
And you'll see it, you'll say it's water. It's usually around right before the curb on the exterior to your house, most often on the front of it. Okay, so you need to take this cover off. And what you're looking for is this valve right here. Right now it's open, just like the other valve in the gas valve, it's in line with the pipe. To shut it off, you could have a tool. This is one that you can use, fit it in here and turn it. But I recommend these valves are hard to manipulate. This is a water valve, bigger, goes right inside here just like that. But because it extends further out, you have more force to be able to open it, because some of these valves haven't been opened in a long time. It might take some effort.
This is the electrical panel of my house. We're in the garage right now. Why would he need to know where this is and what to do with it?
It's a good question. So most of these panels are inside the garage. Sometimes they're exterior to your house. Some important reasons why you would need to do if you're doing some kind of work in your home. You might want to shut off a particular room or area of your home. But say you have a flooding or you have a roof leak and there's water that compromised into the components, particularly electrical components in your home. You wouldn't want some arcing situation to start a fire. So it's a good idea to know where your electrical panel is and what you would need to do to shut it off. Your panel here, as you have it listed here, this is what we recommend. So you have the areas in particular to your home. If you needed to shut off a particular room or area of your house, it's always a good idea to have these marked. Really important. And if you don't, it's pretty simple. It's just you and your wife or your kids, with your cell phones, just, hey, I'm shutting this off. Which room does not have electrical power? And then you just mark it and start denoting it. You did a good job by doing that. Things that you want to consider before you approach, that you look that there's no water or any other potentially dangerous situation. You don't want to mess with water and electricity. So you want to do what I call situational awareness. You want to make sure that it's safe to approach. We're going to determine that that's the case. You're going to identify, these are all your switches. Some of these might be different. They may look more and they may be more numerous. In this particular prop, what we're going to want to do is do a switch at a time. You don't want to hit them all at once. You don't want to do multiple switches. You want to do one switch at a time. What I like to do is start in one column, off, 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 then I'm going to hit my main. Sometimes you'll have electrical panels that have a lever. So this is just one example. What you want to do is make sure you don't hit them all at the same time. And the last one you want to shut off is your main. And the way you could identify it in this one is on the top. Some of them may be identified. What you want to really remember is that you're going to do one at a time. You don't want to do multiple ones. And you're going to want to make sure that you have a sequence so that you don't do one here and you jump up to this one and you might forget to hit some.
Okay, so I actually brought props, so we get an opportunity. You guys can come up here and actually practice with these props. At this point, does anybody have any questions about some of the stuff that we covered? Uh-huh. Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah, so that handout, the book, I believe has some of that material in there. So look through it. If it's not in there, the pastors will have my email, so you guys can email me, and I can forward you actually different things that will cover all of that. So I believe it's in there, but I haven't looked through that book in a while. So I don't remember, but if it's not in there, you have a means to contact me and I'll provide that for you. Okay.
Oh, I just wanted to know how many drops per water of bleach to neutralize water?
So it's a concentration of bleach to water. There's a ratio. And depending on the quantity of water, just remembering that the bleach has to be unscented if you're going to do that. Christian?
Yeah, how long does water? I've been storing water like 3 years old. Is it gone? Is it no good now?
Good question. Off the top of my head, I don't remember, but you shouldn't be storing it that long. So like anything else, stagnant water, even if it's in a controlled container, can start absorbing the material of the container. So you want to make sure you're using, if possible, glass, but it's not really feasible to have a huge glass container with water. So you want to use those plastics that don't start to break down. But again, if you want to email me, I can find that out for you. Off the top of my head, I don't remember, but 3 years is too much. You could water your lawn. You know, there is tablets, and I think that's one of the items I forgot to bring, that you can have purification tablets that you can buy. Again, you can email me and I can make suggestions of places where you can buy some of these tablets. REI is one of them, but there's specific places that sell disaster preparedness training items that you can get those there. 6 months, yeah. So, yeah, 3 years is much too long. Aldo?
Does it matter if it's spring water or distilled water? Is there a better than the other, or it doesn't matter when it comes to water?
Good question. You could get distilled water. I believe that it can last a little longer. I don't remember off the top of my head. But if you're getting distilled water in those kind of quantities that they're asking you to have, that can become expensive. So in most cases, probably regular tap water, but if you can buy purification systems, sometimes you can buy actual systems that will purify the water all throughout that's coming in. But if you want to invest in distilled water, I believe that can last a little longer, but I don't, off the top of my head, remember the actual length of time. I could find out for you, though.
Yeah, if so, my concern when you were talking, if the water goes out, we can have all our water ready and stored, and we can have enough maybe to wash with, but what about the toilet? What about that's the toilet goes out? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, maybe if you want a home, you buy a compost toilet.
Yeah. Yeah, so see, he brought a good point. If you have water that you don't think is good anymore because you've had it for a long time, or the situation arises and you know this water is probably suspect and you have a way of purifying it, you can use it to flush the toilet. You can use it to water, water your plants or whatnot. So, but again, probably more hygienic. You can wash your hands and not. If there's a situation where we're really severe water shortage because of an incident, you don't want to waste probably watering your plants. You want to conserve as much of that as you can. That's why if you guys invest in water filtration, whether it's the portable ones or whatnot, then you can filter some of that water besides using possibly bleach.
For my question, maybe you're going to go over this, but I'm remembering a friend of mine actually will travel sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
On the toilet, I bought little cute things, and I don't know where they are though. But anyway, you could just use a trash can, right?
Mm-hmm.
So put a trash can under the toilet seat, let it cover the bowl, that you contain.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Not the red ones because I know,
Yeah, yeah. If you're gonna do that, it's a good idea to designate it by color. So, yeah, yeah. Most places, if you go to hospitals, they identify biohazards, which waste would be one, by a red color. So if you do that, you can do that way, or you can buy those little portable ones. They look like those buckets from Home Depot. They actually have a lid and a seat, and they do come with little bags, or you can use a grocery bag and stuff. So yeah, I mean, something happens pretty significant. There's little simple things that we take for granted that if you don't think about it, that, whoa, what am I going to do for this? How do I adapt to this situation? So right now it's a good time to start getting the wheels turning, for you to start thinking about the different things. Uh-huh. Oh, no, the switches are electrical, so. Uh, yeah. Yeah, that's all your electrical panel. Mm, the only one that was sequence of switches was your electrical panel. And I do have a prop. It looks a little different, but the water just two valves, and sometimes you won't have an in-house valve. If there's a leak or there's an earthquake, and you don't want your water flooding your house, so you're going to have to invest on a water valve, which happens to be something like this, and depending on the video I said open, I meant to say close. So those valves have not been closed in potentially decades. So you might be really huffing and puffing to try to get it to move. Minimum of this size, they come much bigger. In our fire trucks and our fire engines, we're shutting off mains. So it takes 2 to 3 firefighters, because maybe there's a sheared hydrant and we have thousands of gallons of water coming. So we have these much bigger than this. They're probably as tall as I am, because they go down into the subterranean surface to turn off that water main. They can become pretty significant, but yeah, the switches was an electrical panel. But whenever any kind of situation that you're going to try to address, always like situational awareness. Like what we preach when we teach CERT is safety first and foremost to yourself. Because once you have this knowledge, and I use the example when you travel and you're in an airplane and the stewardess is giving her whole spiel that you're going to go out, know where the exits are. When those oxygen masks come down, what do they tell you? Put it on yourself first. Well, my 3-year-old daughter's right here. I should put it on her. It's not being selfish. It's not being self-preserving. It's you're good, then you can render good. If you try to fiddle to put it on grandma or your little girl and you go down, then she's on her own. So it's just something to bear in mind. It's not a selfish thing, but now that you have what I call power, you have some of this training awareness. If a situation happens, get yourself good, because now you can render good. It might feel awkward, but that's a good way to look at it. Right. Yeah, good question. So Pastor Sharon asked me, once we shut these utilities, we're talking gas, and this one's the bigger one. We're talking the water, and here's an example of a water valve right here. Or we're talking electrical. The electrical, once you know it's safe, and it's safe to do so, you can turn it off in the same sequence. Don't do the main, do the main first, and then, do the main first and do a one switch at a time. The water, if you're going to do it slowly, because there's a thing called the water hammer. As the water is moving, there's friction between the plumbing, and there's bends and turns and whatnot. The water, if you switch it on too fast, it's going to boom, it's going to hit these different angles and turns, and it could potentially damage your internal plumbing. So when we're flowing water, and we're talking thousands of gallons per minute for a fire, there's this thing, water hammer, that we have to take into account. So we're opening it, and I just remember, because they ingrain it in the academy, and you're being tested that you're verbatim saying and doing everything. Opening water slowly and deliberately. Thousands of times we were doing that. Why? Because it becomes a muscle memory. Now, the gas is a different thing. When you do shut off your gas, if you don't know what you're doing, it's not a matter of turning it on. You have to light your pilot on your water heater. Your stove might be gas, or your dryer might be gas, and you have to light that up. That seismic valve that we had in our home, which was right here, this is your feeder, so it comes in from your supply. This right here is in a line. So these eyelets that you see here that also are part of the water valve, if you don't pay your gas or your water bill, the water company or the gas company comes and put a really heavy duty lock there. That's the purpose of those eyelets. And it's also easily to identify that you shut it off. If you're turning your gas on, Pia loves plants, and we have hundreds of pots in our yard, outside and inside, and that seismic valve was next to the water hose. I'd be taking a shower and nothing but cold water, and I knew that she inadvertently hit the valve. So, but I knew how to turn the gas on and light all the pilots. If you don't, then I would call the gas company, or if you have a person that you trust, then they can show you how to do it, and then you could learn to do it yourself. That's the only thing that you don't want to mess with gas. If you turn it back on, you got to make sure you light up all the pilots of all the appliances that are gas fed. Well? Yeah, they do. So if you live in a multi-unit apartment or condominium, good idea to go look at it. Talk to your manager, the person in charge of the property. Do they have some kind of plan in place? If they don't know, encourage them. Hey, there's CERT training. It's free. It's through FEMA, and it's taught by different fire departments and some police departments. So it might behoove you to learn that. And if not, hey, I have the training. Can I show you? So it's a matter of being proactive, because sometimes these people that seemingly are in charge may tell you that they care, but actions speak louder than words, and they're not doing anything. So what does that mean? That means you have to take it further. But yeah, there's gas meters for depending on how many units there is, and your electrical panel might be inside your dwelling unit. Yeah. So see, if you don't know these things, go find out. Go look around your house. Go look around your condominium. Go look about your apartment building. If your mom or your dad or an uncle that's a little older doesn't know, hey, we're going to go visit you. I learned something new that I want to help you. And you're going to either show them or identify a neighbor that you have a relationship with that can assist them in the event something happens. So it's good things to know.
Given that it's so complicated to turn it back on, so
Mhm.
at what point would you say is necessary to turn off the gas? Is it like any if it's really that big one, like we should just automatically go turn off the gas? Or we're smelling something, or what would you say would be like you need to do it? Or should we
Yeah.
just leave it?
Yeah, it's a good question. At what point do we decide to shut it off? Any significant seismic event, I would do it. Because you don't know what the underground damage may be to your particular house, or maybe to the feeder line somewhere down where the gas is being plumbed. So gas doesn't have a natural scent. It's an additive to the gas, so you can smell it. If you own your own home, these seismic valves are worth the investment. And if you get a good plumber, they can show you, and they're actually not that hard, maybe for me, but if you're not comfortable, you can always ask somebody, and they could show you what you need to do, how the sequence is. But when in doubt, I say always err in the side of safety. Fire, seismic event, potential explosion, happening. You're hearing on the news. There's a guy has a bomb. It's just a few houses down the line. So most of these earthquakes, the damage is either aftershocks, or because of fires, because of gas lines that broke. and there's sparking, electrical compromise with the electricity because now there's water that's leaking, and now there's a spark, and it's like the perfect storm. You see that spark, and you have this gas, and boom, then you have a not only damage from an earthquake, but damage from a fire.
Are seismic valves required with new builds?
Good question. I'm not sure about the seismic valves being required. That's right here. We have our resident expert.
It's actually required in every sale of a home. So it's required for all new construction, remodels, everything.
Mm-mm. You shouldn't use candles. You shouldn't even switch the light on. Seriously, even just switching the light on or plugging something. You may not see it, but there's a small little arcing that takes place as you put a plug into an outlet. It's something that small can ignite that very volatile gas. So it's just something to be aware of. Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your manager should know. He or she should be aware where all the utilities are, because it would only stand to reason that they're either the owner of the property or somebody's paying them to manage that property, that they're being instructed where all the utilities are. When we respond to fires, one of the responsibilities of the firefighter, it's called a utility man or person now. And that person is responsible to shut off the gas, the water, and the electricity on any fire. It doesn't matter how small, how big, because we don't know if there's been a movement of fire. Gas, smoke rises, right? It goes to the area, release resistance. It goes into vents. It started in this room, now it's going down to 2 businesses down the line because the venting goes from here to over there. So that's why we have a utility person that's responsible to shut off all the utilities. And in this case, yeah, that is something to think about. But I'm going to proceed because we have a lot to cover. And if you have other questions, feel free to either ask me or at some point we can go over that stuff. Setting up an emergency evacuation plan. A good place to begin emergency preparedness is by writing a family emergency plan. Your plan should include every member of your household. It is important that every member understand where all the exits are, whether they're windows or doors. In the end, a safe meeting place should be identified outside of your home. What to do in the event of an earthquake. During an earthquake, if indoors, stay there. Get under a desk or a table or stand in a corner. Stay away from windows, bookcases, or any heavy pieces of furniture. Remember, drop, cover, and hold on. Cover the back of your head or neck, write the earthquake out, and vacate when it's safe to do so. What do you do if your clothes catches on fire? Cover your airway and stop, drop, and roll. Roll back and forth to try to put that fire out. If there's someone there to assist you, they can use a jacket to help smother that fire and put it out. Make sure all exits are properly functioning. Everyone in your house should be able to unlock every window and door. What to do in the event of a fire in your home. Every home should be equipped with properly functioning smoke alarms. If awoken by a smoke alarm, proceed to the door and with the back of your hand, touch the door and the doorknob.
If hot, do not go out that way. Crawl low and notify everyone in the household. Remember to crawl to the nearest exit. It is easy to panic and get disoriented because of the thick, heavy smoke. By keeping low, you are breathing cleaner air. Proceed to the nearest exit. If it's safe to do so, you may stand. If not, crawl out and proceed to go to the area that's identified as a safe meeting place. Remember, do not try to retrieve any valuables. Go to the area and determine that everyone has made it out. Now, you can proceed to dial 911 if you have means to do so. If not, ask a neighbor to dial 911 for you.
Okay, some simple things. So if you wake up, see, notice how all the doors were closed? That makes a big difference. Smoke travels, and most people succumb or either severely injured or they become fatalities in fires because of the smoke or the superheated air. When you see these movies like Backdraft, which is kind of an old movie, and you see the firefighter with the coat open and he's coming in there, that is such fiction. When you go on these fires, and I've been on a few of them, you can put your hand right in front of your face, you see nothing. You see nothing. You have all this protective clothing, which is great, but the key is when we're responding to these fires, we can't think that because I'm so protected, when this equipment eventually will start to fail and it's too late. So we have to see and know the weather, the conditions, how the smoke is going. You'll eventually see a glow. Now our equipment, our fire department equipment is equipped with thermal imagers that will see different colors, either white or like a darker gray. You could see people in smoke. You can see where the fire is. It's so surreal to be in a situation like that where you can't think or feel anything. You're going on your training, you're relying on your equipment and your buddy, you know, and if you're a believer, you know that the Lord has you. But that's why keep low, keep one hand on the wall. When you're at a hotel, which way did you go in? Did you look at the exit? If I need to evacuate and it's a smoke-filled room, a corridor, I know that the exit is to my right. I'm going to keep low, my hand on the wall, because it's very easy to panic or get disoriented, and you're going to feel such heat. But the difference from being from here to standing up can be hundreds of degrees. Besides the heat and the smoke and the toxic gases, when you notice that when he was demonstrating stop, drop, and roll, cover his face, it's not going to filter these potentially hazardous fumes and gases, but it'll limit the ability for these synthetic materials. This is cotton, but a lot of us have clothing that is synthetic. When it burns fast, it burns hot, and it releases a lot of toxic gases. Simple little things just to alter, to know in the event something happens that we all need to do. We're caught, and we happen to know this training, we can actually help somebody. So this is a go back video. It's like 5 minutes, but because we got a little later start, I'm just going to bypass it. Basically, this video goes over what my go bag is, and it has some of the components that you see there. A multi-tool, a knife, some rope, duct tape, and all that. Rather than go through it, I want to make sure we cover everything because I want to make sure we get an opportunity to do the hands-on. So I'm just going to bypass this video. It basically shows you, it's about 5 minutes, all the components to my bag. But your bag may be different. I happen to wear glasses. I have a spare glasses in there. You may have a medical condition, diabetes, or you might have high blood pressure, so you want to incorporate extra. Talk to your doctor and get a prescription for that kind of stuff. So these are things to consider for your particular go bag. Okay, so now we're going to transition into a fire. What does a fire, what makes a fire burn. There's a thing called the fire triangle. And what that is, it's 3 components that go through a chemical reaction. You have to have fuel that can burn. You have to have a heat source that will heat that fuel. So a lot of people think, okay, this is going to burn here. The actual wood is burning. The heat rises to the temperature where this starts emitting gases, and it's those gases that are burning first. Then the material itself is burning. But if you don't have the proper concentration of oxygen, then you cannot sustain a fire. So the different extinguishers that we're going to cover, and the ones we have here are what's called multi-purpose extinguishers. They can put out what we call ordinary combustibles. Ordinary combustibles can be fabric, cardboard, wood, things like that. That's a Class A fire. A B fire is combustible and flammable liquids, gasoline, acetone, things like that. And a Class C fire is energized electrical equipment. Could be a computer, a printer. Now, the thing to remember about a Class C fire, it's a Class C fire energized electrical equipment once it has electrical current running through it. The moment you shut that electricity off, it now becomes a Class A fire because it's made of plastic and some other components. But we're going to go more extensively into that. Just to remember the fire triangle, when you extinguish a fire, you're going to do one of those 3 things. Remove the oxygen, remove the fuel, or remove the heat source, or a combination of them. Different extinguishers will do this in different ways. So I talked to you about the different classes of fire. Ordinary combustibles, wood, paper, fabric, that's considered Class A fire. We talked about flammable and combustible liquids, gasoline, diesel, acetone. Class C fire, energized electrical equipment, like this right here. It could be a big screen TV or whatnot. Just remember, once the electrical current is removed from that, it now becomes a Class A fire. And then a Class K fire are cooking oils that require a specific extinguisher. It's called a K extinguisher. So the restaurants that you might go to, they're supposed to have fire suppressive systems, or depending on how big that area is, at least one or more than one Class K extinguisher to extinguish a fire that are cooking oils and greases. So here's an example of the different fires. You'll see a Class A fire is denoted by an A and a green triangle. A B for Class B fires, that's red in a box. C is blue in a circle. A Class D is combustible metals. Magnesium is one. So metals do burn, and when they burn, they're very volatile. They require either copious amounts of waters to extinguish, or special chemicals or powders to put those fires out. And we talked about a Class K fire, which is K, that's black. Why am I going over this? If you encounter a fire that you need to put out, you want to make sure you have the appropriate extinguisher. Remember, safety first and foremost for yourself. You're going to approach a fire with an extinguisher. Do I have the appropriate extinguisher? Is it for the appropriate fire? Am I approaching a fire, but I have another means of egress? In other words, a quick exit. So these are things that you need to run in your head before you decide to use an extinguisher. And we're going to talk about how to use an extinguisher. And this is just telling you that any kind of Class B and K fires should never be extinguished with water. And we're going to have a short video that's going to tell you why that is a bad idea.
This guy is trying to make apples flambé for his wife. Watch as he pours the flaming brandy into a hot pan. Very quickly, he's got a disaster on his hands. Nutley, New Jersey Fire Captain David Hamilton says you should never, ever transfer flaming alcohol from one pan to another.
When you go to pour that, the flame is still going to want to come up. So as he's pouring, the flame is still coming out of the pan and going up, even though the liquid's pouring down.
YouTube is loaded with other frightening videos of kitchen cooking catastrophes.
Holy
Cooking with oil can lead to grease fires, which are particularly dangerous. Can you believe this sudden burst of flames is the result of water being thrown on a grease fire? We're cooking and grease catches fire like this. What do we do?
Worst thing you could do, throw water on it. Here, throw the water on it, watch what happens.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
The greases will float on top of the water goes in, splashes it everywhere, makes a much bigger mess, much bigger fire.
So, what's the proper way of putting out a grease fire?
Easiest thing, put the lid right on top of it.
In the case of a small fire, you can also use baking soda. Oh, wow. But the safest and most effective way to put out a grease fire is with a fire extinguisher. And Captain Hamilton says, when using a fire extinguisher, the word to remember is pass.
You would pull the pin, aim at the base of the fire, squeeze, and sleep.
Whatever you do, remember, when it comes to grease fires, water is definitely not the way to go. Oh my gosh.
Okay, so that's a good example about using the wrong extinguishing element for the type of class fire that was. The thing that captain forgot to mention is they basically took away oxygen. That's how they put that fire off, by putting the lid on there. As soon as that's done, eliminate the heat source. You should turn off that burner. So also, my wife and I said, I don't know if I should play this video. I don't like the way he threw that water. He's not wearing protective equipment. That's how I think. And she goes, it just demonstrates a good thing to keep in a note, because it's dangerous if you are trying to extinguish a fire with the wrong extinguishing element. Just something to keep in mind. So these are just different fire extinguishers, and you can see this one is a water can or a water extinguisher, and a K extinguisher. Look very similar, but they're completely different. So you need to know what extinguisher you have and for what class of fire it is, because you don't want to be caught in a situation like that video just showed, putting water on a Class B fire. Very, very bad idea. So these are multi-purpose. That's why if you're going to invest on any product for your safety, this is the Underwriters Laboratory, UL, and it'll tell you that this is a Class A, B, C fire. You don't want to use what the demonstration, another critique I had of that video, they have a little snub nose extinguisher. Don't buy those. Get the ones like the ones that are hanging on the wall with a hose like this one, because you can direct it, you have more control, and you're not coming as close to the fire as you could from a hose. And if you're going to use that extinguisher, just remember the PASS acronym, and keep your distance. Make sure you have a way out. If that fire cannot be put out by that extinguisher, I need to get out of here. Guess what? You can leave, close the door. Because that fire started off as a small fire, now becomes a bigger fire, and you left the door open, you're basically introducing that fire to the rest of that area. That's another video that covers the past a little. Because of time, I'm going to forego this one. Okay. So,
But you can't come in unless you give the password.
Yes, you can, buddy. Hey, Star, we got trick-or-treater.
Okay, just two quick videos. I always want to like leave some kind of an impression. Something as simple as closing your door can make such a significant difference. So at this point, we just finished our first PowerPoint. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, there's fire blankets out there. So there's products that, and a lot of them are come up from ideas from firefighters. But just like anything else, investigate the product, see what it's made of, and who's endorsing it. Does it have a UL certification on it? That's really big, because we have a lot of products, and not to slam any particular country, that are coming from different places of the world, Mexico, China, whatever, that are inferior, that you really want to risk your life or the safety of your family or your property on a product like that? I wouldn't. It depends on the fire, how big that fire is, how close. If you can get close enough and you know that's a quality product that will do it, maybe that's the way to go. But if you have to get kind of close, also just remember, we're talking about an interior fire that is not subject to the wind, terrain. If you're outside and there's wind, you're going uphill and all that, you want to read what you have in front of you. Read the smoke. Where is that smoke going? Are the flames banking towards you? If they are, then your means of attack should be in a different direction. So just take those things into account. Most typical extinguishers have anywhere from 6 to 8.5 foot distance. That's why those little snub-nose extinguishers, I wouldn't waste my money on them. A lot of campers and like boats have those because they're small and compact, but it really makes a difference actually having a fire extinguisher with a hose like the ones we have right here. And the minimum rating, all these numbers mean 3, 2A, 10 BC. It just means that there's some kind of formula that they've done a test on that an average person can put out like maybe a 10-foot square of fire. I'd have to review that formula to get you, but minimum a 2A 10 BC extinguisher, and those are the ones you see here. And what they should be, every business is required to get them serviced every year. In your home, you buy them. Nobody's gonna tell you you need to get rid of it, but you bought it at Costco. You don't know how long it was in their warehouse, and before that, it got shipped from who knows where. So that extinguisher you bought today might have been in the shelf over a year plus by the time you actually purchased it. Just something to keep in mind.
Are there any like natural alternatives aside from like a fire extinguisher, like how the guy used baking soda, like for each class?
Yeah, so baking soda for that particular one worked. If you go to a sawmill and they do a lot of sanding and woodwork, they're required to have vents that get that minute particles of dust that are in the air. And we're very strict when we inspect these businesses, because these minute things that are floating in the air, you might not even be able to see them, are really volatile. So if something ignites it, it's almost like a gas. But yeah, so you can use baking powder in that case. Depending on what kind of fire you're talking about, I can't think, sand, you know, playground sand, and you have a Class B fire like that, you have access to it, you can pour it on there. Just remember that you're trying to remove one of those 3 elements of the fire triangle. But if there's a heat source that is heating that, you extinguish it, also remove the heat as well.
I know I work in professional kitchens, and one of the things that we usually have is kosher salt or flour around.
Oh.
So if there's major fires, we just
Pour it on there, yeah.
Kosher salt on the fires.
Yeah, see, that's another one. So, yeah.
Yes. So most professional kitchens, we have major fires. We usually have boxes of kosher salt. So in case we can't get to the fire extinguisher or people are panicking, the salt is right there, and you pour the salt over the over the fire. In culinary school, there will be people that are training, and they will try to pour water, and I'm like, oh my God, this is about to be a mess. But then, somebody will come in with the kosher salt and pour it out. Also, when you're pouring liquor, you want to pour it into something smaller instead of using the bottle, because I've seen where you can't see the fire, and when they're pouring, it catches, the bottle catches fire, and it blows up. So I've seen that happen, where people not properly pouring liquor into the banana flambe. So just being careful of those things, and also your sternos. I've seen this happen as well, where people place all the sternos, clump them all together. They turn five of them at a time, and the whole sheet pan or hot box catches on fire because they didn't spread them out. So.
Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that, but it makes sense. So you're removing one of the elements. You're preventing that particular fire for obtaining oxygen that it needs to sustain it burning, that chemical reaction. So any other questions?
So I have one of those, like, the square with a glass, and I admit I've never really looked at it. Am I supposed to, like, smash the glass to get the extinguisher?
Oh, yeah, so there's extinguisher cabinets, and you'll see them in older buildings and whatnot. That glass is breakable, and you can break it to get into it. You don't see them as often as you used to. It's usually in older occupancies. It also depends on where it is. If it's an area that's subjected to a lot of vandalism and stuff, these people will take the extinguishers, use them up, and nothing worse than if you're going to use an extinguisher, you're going to approach it. Look at the gauge. Does it show green? Just because it shows green, there's potential that that gauge got stuck in green, which means that it's full and then fully operational. So you want to keep in mind what we train when we train these people in CERT is you got off the ground, do a test before you start approaching that fire. Nothing worse than you went in there and went into a room, and now you're going to use the extinguisher and nothing. It's dead. So before you commit, make sure that you have multiple ways to get out, that you tested the extinguisher, that it actually works. They use that extinguisher on that cooking demonstration for the video. When kitchens, restaurants, or whatnot use a multi-purpose extinguisher, it will take them, and I know it will take them potentially a week or longer to clean it up, and it has to be inspected by a health inspector. So I'm not telling you not to use it, but if there's another means like kosher salt or baking soda or just putting a lid on it, you might want to consider that than if you've got it all over your kitchen and all over wherever you're at. If that's the only thing you can do, so what? Do it. But just look at the fire, and is there another means of putting it out? Maybe. Okay, just different things to keep in mind. So, yeah, no. So this is basically the end of this portion, because now we're going to transition into the medical stuff. And the medical stuff is a lot of stuff. And my goal is to get you guys hands-on. So we were just going to transition into the second PowerPoint, unless, do we want to break? No, that's fine. Is that okay? Uh-huh.
So, well then, okay, because I didn't want to ask something you were going to cover. So then I just. Like, say there's a fire, say I feel the heat, whatever. I have a window.
Mm-hmm.
But would I just do what I can to smash out the window? Because I know a rush of air would be a bad thing too.
So yes, if you introduce oxygen into an environment that's already superheated, you could potentially have a flash fire going. But if you're in that environment, it's that hot, most likely you're already succumbed to the hot fumes and the hot gases. But that's why it's important, close your door. If you need to break a window, for example, if we needed to break a window here and to get out, we don't want to break the window on the bottom, because guess what? That becomes a guillotine. If you're going to break a window, start from the top Work your way down. If you're in a panic and you break down and maybe it's holding and you try to get out, guess what? That big piece of glass that's kind of heavy can fall on you and cause you severe damage, or maybe you become a fatality to that. So yeah, the little simple things in your case, Tracy, that maybe you should have some kind of a tool. Make sure your windows can be easily opened. And if not, depending if it's your home or you live in a condo or something, the property manager, make them aware of it. They should fix that. That's not a safe situation for anybody. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we love our pets. They can be family members and whatnot, but you saw little Sam, and he's not so little anymore. That was a few years ago. The back of your hand, guess what? This is one of your biggest tools. Your brain and your hands. You touch that doorknob and it's hot, you basically lost your right arm or your right hand or whatnot. From the top of the back of your hand, if you burn the back of your hand, you still have your palm and your fingers to use. So that's why you start at the top, go to the bottom, then you feel the doorknob. The doorknobs are usually made out of metal. So that's probably what's going to feel the hottest. If you feel heat, don't even attempt to go out that way. It's unsafe. That's why you should be able to open your windows. If you live in a multi-story residential area, then you should probably start looking into those collapsible stairs and stuff. I had a question a few years back regarding that, and like 3 years ago, there wasn't any Underwriter Laboratories endorsed ones, but there's different products out there that are endorsed by different organizations. Anything that's endorsed by the National Fire Protection Agency, that means that the firefighters on a natural level have looked at this and they considered it a safe product. It may not necessarily be Underwriter Laboratories blessing. And in this particular case, 3 years ago, I couldn't find one that was endorsed or stamped by the Underwriters Laboratories. It's just like anything else, right? Buyer beware. Do your due diligence, do your research. Now, we have access to the internet. Go to your local station, maybe the particular station you can call. They do have not a 911 number, they have a residential business line, and you can ask them. So there's different ways that you can obtain information. So now we're going to the medical. Yes, this is a plug for my buddies at Station 73 in U-Haul, where my wife and I now live. But shout out to these guys as a paramedic unit responding to a medical call. So now we're going into the medical portion of our training. Some of the guiding principles regarding medical. Safety first and foremost on anything. We always want to make sure that you're not compromising your safety or putting yourself in a situation. You're there to make the situation better. You don't want to become an additional victim that now they have to rescue the person you're trying to rescue, now yourself, because now you put yourself in a bad spot. The personnel available and the tools and equipment available. Now, in an ideal setting, like the stuff that I showed you right here, that's great if you have it. You may have to compromise. You don't have dressing, you don't have bandaging, but what? You have your t-shirt, you have other means of potentially making a dressing or bandage. So this is just to give you an idea of the stuff that's out there, but you have your head. You're gonna have to look at the situation and maybe do something that's not of the norm, but that will work. So there's 3 killers. So we're trying to make this as simple as possible because, you know, firefighters can be hard-headed when they ingrain stuff. We have so many things to know and learn. Try to make it simple. Acronyms. So it's as easy as ABC. We're identifying 3 ways that somebody can potentially succumb to. Airway obstruction. And when we're talking about an airway obstruction, it could be some kind of a blockage that's partially blocking your airway or completely occluding your airway, preventing you from being able to get air in or air out. The other situation could be excessive bleeding. Uncontrolled bleeding could be internal that you can't see, but there's different indicators that your potential patient or your victim can manifest, that you can identify they potentially can be going into shock. We're going to talk about those identifiers, and we're going to talk about how you can help and render help to an individual you suspect is going into shock. We're going to apply these different techniques to control bleeding, to clear an obstructed airway, and treat for shock. Like I said, airway, bleeding, circulation, this is simple, ABCs. If you just remember this simple acronym and you do it in that sequential order, you see a potential victim that needs care, you're going to make sure they have a patent airway. What does that mean? There's nothing occluding or partially obstructing them being able to get sufficient amount of air. You're going to control bleeding, and you're going to make sure circulation. Why we talk circulation with shock, and there's different types of it. We're going to cover it a little further in this PowerPoint. That it's basically something is affecting circulation of blood throughout your body. And the body it's amazingly made. Our Lord made our bodies in a way we compensate when we're going into different medical conditions that start to manifest. And even you, without having a doctor's degree or anything, you could see some of these signs and symptoms and already identify this potential victim needs help and how you can do it. We're going to go over all that. So the major airway obstruction many people don't know is the tongue. When a person is conscious, this airway is open, but when the person becomes unconscious, the tongue can completely occlude the airway to the point within 4 minutes, a person can have permanent brain damage. So when you suspect the person is unconscious, scene safety, right? Situational awareness, you see somebody on the ground, I'm not just gonna run. Why is he on the ground? Wait a minute, I see some arcing from some electrical cables that are out. Or wait, I see water. Oh, and there's water near that electrical panel. Before you commit, make sure it's safe for you to approach and to render assistance. So, simple technique called a head-tail-chin lift. If you know that it's safe for you to render care, and you don't suspect that that individual, you see a ladder, 20-foot ladder, the person on the ground, probably nobody saw it, you could probably think that that person potentially fell off the ladder. Did that person fall off the ladder? Or maybe that person had some kind of a cardiac issue which caused them to fall. But you see a ladder, pretty significant area that he fell from, a height. So it's easy to deduce that that person can have a head, neck, or back injury. So if that's the case, we got to be careful that we're not maneuvering the neck or the head, that we can cause more damage or potential nerve damage inside. So just something to be aware of, what caused that individual to be there. So we're gonna, when you approach somebody, so I'm gonna use one of my mannequins. You approach, you did your scene safety, it's safe to approach, you're gonna go, are you okay? Are you okay? You're not shaking them violently, you're just seeing if they can respond to you. Most people will respond if there's nothing wrong with them. If they're having some kind of a medical issue, then they may not respond. But you've looked, listen, and feel. You're gonna look. You can do the head, tail, chin lift maneuver. You're gonna look to see if you see in a chest rise. You're gonna put your ear close to them. Can you hear breaths coming out? And you're going to feel. You could even put your hand on their stomach as they're breathing, that they should be a rise on their abdominal area. So it could be very difficult. We're outside on Sunset or Hollywood Boulevard, and there's a lot of noise. So just things to be aware of. Then you're going to do the head, tail, chin lift, which you're seeing here. You're going to open that airway because maybe that person isn't breathing because their tongue is obstructing that airway. But you're also going to feel for a pulse. So when we feel for a pulse, a good way to feel the carotid pulse is your 2 digits. Don't use your thumb. Your thumb is a major digit. You can actually feel your own pulse if you're trying to feel somebody else's pulse. And it's right here. If you put your 2 fingers, you can feel a pulse. So in the event that there's a suspected cervical injury, head, neck, or spine injury, there's another maneuver, which is called a jaw thrust maneuver, which will limit the movement of the head and the neck in the event that you suspect that there is some kind of compromise to the head, neck, or back. Okay, and this video is going to talk about that.
So thinking about basic airway maneuvers, the first one that we can do is a head tilt chin lift. And to do that, we're going to take one hand and place it just on top of the patient's forehead. Take our other hand and just put two fingers just underneath their mandible or their jaw. We're then just going to lift gently upwards with this other hand. And in doing so, that opens the patient's airway, removes the tongue off the back of the soft palate, and hopefully provides us with a patent airway initially.
Okay, so back in the day, they used to teach what's called a blind sweep when you suspect that that person isn't being able to get air in because there's some kind of obstruction. Now, absolutely do not stick your fingers and try to see if you can get something out. It's actually potentially can be pushing it further into the airway, making it even harder to remove that. So this demonstrated what we just talked about, head tilt chin lift. Simple maneuver, you don't need any equipment or whatnot. You saw that instructor doing this. You can do that, that works. Personally, what I do is this. Very simple. This thing to keep in mind is that when we do the head tilt chin lift, we do not suspect or see any indications of any compromise with the head, neck, or back. Okay, so we talked about foreign obstructions. With little kids, little toys, they stick everything in their mouth. For most adults, it's actually when they're eating. I think I was just out of high school. I was working at Vaughn's, putting my way through college, and I was having my lunch break. They only gave us 30 minutes, and I was eating this Subway sandwich, and I was trying to gobble it up too fast. I kid you not, I had a block, and nobody was in there. And it wasn't me, it must have been the Lord, because I just went to the table and I got it out. But man, it put the fear of God in me, because I was like, I can feel it, I can't breathe, I'm gonna go out. It's a terrible feeling. So I actually experienced it. What did I learn from that? Don't rush your eating. Take your time, don't, even, I had a half an hour break. I wanted to make sure I ate my lunch and got back on time. But man, terrible feeling. If any of you have ever had that, it's an awful, awful feeling. So, what is a universal sign of an airway obstruction? You'll see people putting their hands around their neck. They have an inability to speak. They have a wide-eyed look. They're panicking, because just like I described to you, that was me. They don't have any ability to breathe, or they may have noisy breathing. You may hear it, and it's uncharacteristically noisy. They don't have an ability to cough. and their color is turning blue, what's called cyanotic. So all that means is they're losing oxygen, and they're starting to manifest physical symptoms that you can see that they're having some kind of a medical issue. So there's two: mild airway obstruction. There's some air exchange. They can cough somewhat forcibly. You can hear wheezing or gagging. And they may be able to speak, but with difficulty. So that's called a mild airway obstruction. Do not hit them in the back. Do not try to assist them. Hey, you know, I know this. Stand by them. Reassure them. They may be able to dislodge that obstruction on their own, or they may be able to swallow whatever it is that, and it's most likely food if it's adults. You just want to make sure you monitor the patient, because guess what? If it becomes a much bigger airway obstruction, then you're going to be able to help them. Severe airway obstruction, there's little to no air exchange. They have no cough, or it's very weak or ineffective, because their coughing is a reaction that the body is to try to expel that foreign object out. Clutching their neck, universal sign. They're going into respiratory distress. This is becoming now very urgent. They're going to eventually lose consciousness, and you're going to see their color change. They're becoming cyanotic. Heimlich maneuver. So, honey, can you come here? I'm going to need you. So, she's just going to be my demonstrator. So, she's not dumb at all. But, so your belly button, mine happens to be right here. So, the way I learned, and I believe it's the easiest way to do it, you make a fist. Make a fist like this. Here's her belly button. Right here. So, I made a fist like this. Guess what? Now I turn it like this. I'm going to do forceful thrust up and in. But when I'm doing it, spread your legs. I'm going to do this, because if she becomes unconscious, I can guide her down slowly. Okay, so easy. Identify the belly button, put your fist over it, move it up, grab your other hand, forcibly up and in. That is one way you can expel that obstruction. And the reason you want to be behind them, because if they go unconscious, they're going to hit the ground. You don't want them now sustaining a neck or head or back injury, besides whatever they're now subject to this airway obstruction. Yeah, you're going in and up. You're being forceful. You're trying to make pressure here to expel that obstruction out. So, just like I showed you, like this demonstration shows here, fist, you identified it, you know you're right behind them. If you can get one of your legs in between theirs, because if they go unconscious, they're going to go down. You want to assist them down safely, and you want to make sure that they don't sustain an additional injury besides the problem that's causing them to have this situation. Now, there could be an obstruction for a baby. So when they're infants, they put everything in their mouth. So infants, a lot of people think that, oh, they're just small adults. They're not. Their anatomy is different. Their heads are bigger in ratio to the body, and adults or heads, most people have heads are rationally sized to the body. Most infants, their heads are bigger. When we're going to do an airway obstruction for an infant, it's almost like you're doing CPR. In between the two nipples, you're going to push down. So it's going to show you this quick video that's going to demonstrate what you can do.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Mortel, Life Support Instructor for Marshfield Clinic. Choking is a life-threatening situation that can happen when a person's airway suddenly becomes blocked and they cannot breathe normally. Choking can happen when people eat or drink too quickly or place foreign objects in their mouths. The risk of choking increases with not chewing food properly, with alcohol intoxication, or with an abnormal swallow reflex. Determine if the person is choking. Knowing how to help somebody in a choking emergency can save a life. There are 3 techniques that you should know during a choking emergency. For adults and children, you should use abdominal thrusts, and for infants, back blows and chest thrusts. If the choking person can cough, you want to encourage that person to keep coughing. However, if the person is unable to breathe, cough, speak, or cry, you're going to want to act immediately. Tell someone to call 911 and then let them know that you are going to be helping them relieve the obstruction. If an adult or child older than 1 year is choking, perform abdominal thrusts, also known as the Heimlich maneuver. First, stand or kneel behind the person who is choking. With one hand, make a fist and place it above the belly button. The second hand, lay over the fist. You're going to do quick upward thrusts to try to remove the object. Continue to provide abdominal thrusts or chest thrusts until the object has been removed or until the choking person can no longer stand. At that point, assist that person to the floor and provide CPR by pushing hard and fast on the chest until help arrives. If a child younger than 1 year is choking, alternate back blows and chest thrusts. Position the infant over your forearm and deliver 5 back blows between the infant's shoulder blades. Roll the infant onto your other forearm, supporting his head and neck, and give 5 chest thrusts. Continue to provide back blows and chest thrusts until the infant stops choking or is not breathing. If the infant is not breathing, lay the infant on a hard surface and start CPR by pushing hard and fast on the infant's chest until help arrives. You can perform abdominal thrusts on yourself if no one is around. If you are home alone and begin choking, you can perform abdominal thrusts on yourself. First, dial 911 even if you can't speak. Then, place your fist in your hand above your belly button, find a hard surface such as a countertop or the back of a chair, and give yourself abdominal thrusts.
Okay, so that covered the A on our ABCs, the airway. Now we're going to transition into bleeding, the B. So there's 3 different types of bleeding. The most serious in arterial bleed. Characteristics of an arterial bleed are bright red because this blood is oxygenated blood, so it's going to be brighter red. It's going to be under higher pressure, so it's going to be spurting out. It's a significant situation. Not that these other ones aren't, but this is the one you need to be more concerned of. The second one is a venous type of bleeding. It's lower, darker color because it's not as rich in oxygen, and it's under pressure, but a much less pressure. So you're going to identify it because it's not spurting out, it's not under the higher pressure, and it's darker in color. The least concerning, not that it wouldn't be concerning, is the capillary. Capillaries are little vessels. Capillaries and venules are small vessels that when the body does this amazing thing, it transitions, it gives oxygen to different organs and different parts of the body, then it moves it back to transition the blood back to get oxygen with the air that you inhale through your lungs. So it'd be kind of like a carpet burn. If you were running and you fell, you were wearing shorts, you scraped your knee, you're going to probably see a type of capillary bleeding. Arterial bleeding, like I said, bright red, richer in oxygen, because every time the heart is beating, it's under pressure. It's a much higher pressure than the other types of bleeding. And you're going to see it spurting out. So this is a quick video. I want you guys to tell me what kind of bleeding you think it is.
Kept in by Bodger. There's a long shot. Reno makes the save. A loose puck in front. Benoit Hole jumped in the rebound, but it's stopped by the left pad. Here's Bodger sending it back in front now. Comes back to the line. Kept in by Troop. Now recovered by Lauder. Gets it back over the line. Here's the pass. On into the Buffalo zone. Mahar goes to the corner of the pass. And oh, wow!
But watch Malarchuk. That's the story right now with the red. Oh, look in. That is the.
Oh, my God.
Oh, please take the camera off and don't even bring it over there, please.
Oh, my God.
Just keep it away.
Oh, terrible.
Oh, my God, what happened?
You're watching Sabres hockey, and the Niagara Volunteers.
So what kind of bleeding you think that was? Yeah, pretty significant. That was in a controlled setting. There's medical physicians there. They do have an area where they have sophisticated medical equipment. Really serious. Those skates, they get sharpened. A lot of the hockey goalies and even some other players will wear neck guards because they can eventually get cut. They're moving very fast, and you know they're all looking at the puck. Things happen in an instant. He got medical attention. He was rendered care by a physician on that in that arena, and he was okay. There was a recent hockey player, I think it was in England, similar situation, didn't make it. So yeah, jugular compromise, it was cut severely. If it was in a different setting, it was actually in an area with a doctor where they have medical facilities that were able to render care instantly. A lot of times these things happen when they don't have that luxury. So venous bleeding, we talked about that. It's under lower pressure, darker blue because it's not as oxygenated. And then we have a capillary bleeding. They carry blood, but it's under much lower pressure. It's slow, it's more of an oozing type of blood, of a bleeding. If you notice that they're putting water, if you're gonna ever flush anything out, it could be some bleeding like this. Make sure that it's sterile water, or it could be a burn. Never put it directly. So if you're using water, and I have like a burn here, put the water here, let it flow down. Because just that water pressure falling even from just a few inches can bring a lot of pain. So just something to think about. So what can we do? We can actually help. The first thing, your first go-to should be is apply direct pressure. Hopefully you have access to gloves. When I started out as a firefighter, AIDS was becoming a little more rampant. I mean, I'm almost 30 years in my career, so this is a ways back. So we talked about universal precautions, gloves, if I needed to put a mask, make sure that there's no body fluids being exchanged. I remember responding on calls where these people that were rendering care became really upset, like, what do you think, I have germs? Because they see me protected. Said, ma'am, you don't know where I've been. You don't know how many patients I've treated today. I'm protecting you from me, not necessarily protecting me from you. It was both, but you're helping somebody, and they became upset because you're fully protected, but it's really for them as well. So if you have access to some kind of protection, if you're going to be in contact with any kind of body fluid, if possible, try to make sure you're wearing what we call PPEs, personal protective equipment. Gloves and a mask and maybe eye protection would be warranted if you can get it. So this is an example of a dressing right here, and this is bandaging. They're applying direct pressure. You could see some examples that we have here. So later on, we're actually going to use that, and we're going to practice on each other. So what's your second go-to? Elevation. So boom, direct pressure, it's not doing it. You can elevate whatever, it be an arm or a leg, whatever that it is that's bleeding. Now you're incorporating direct pressure and you're incorporating elevation as well. It doesn't help. It's not stopping the bleeding. There is pressure points. The three main ones, and there's more than these three, is you have what's called a brachial pressure point. If you lift your arm and you put your fingers here, you're going to have to actually push it to the bone. You will feel a pulse. You're going to stop. You're going to help stop that bleeding by what? Direct pressure, elevation, and you're going to push that pressure point. Now, it's only you there. That individual can actually assist you. I want you to push and push hard. You're going to push to the bone. You're pushing that vessel against the bone to start slowing that blood flow, because there might be blood flow on the lower part of the appendage or whatnot. So we talked about direct pressure, elevation, pressure points. And here are two other examples. You couldn't feel it right now, but there's a femoral pressure point, like right here. So it would be hard to feel it because we're all wearing clothing. And then the back of the knee, there's also a pressure point that you could, if you have a lower extremity bleed, that you can apply pressure to that. Kind of hard to do with our clothing, but you might want to, check it out on yourself later. And these are other pressure points, just to give you an idea. Now, the only reason I'm showing you is because we have multiple pressure points. But we talked about direct pressure, we talked about elevation, and we talked about pressure points. If that doesn't do it, what are we going to do? Last case resort. So, David, can you help me here? Can you hand one out? Just like open these up. So these are what they call combat tourniquets. These came from the military, and I just want you to see what they look like. We're going to apply them later, not on ourselves. I have some props that we can use. But these, you're going to apply it. Now, my training from many years ago was if there is a point where you need to apply a tourniquet, just remember a few things. We don't use wire, cable. We don't use rope. Why? Because that actually cuts into the flesh and it can cause more damage. If you're going to use something, you can use bandaging like what's over there. Or you have a combat tourniquet. You might have to improvise. You can use a necktie, a scarf. It has to be something that's at least 2 inches in width, and you're going to tie it tight. And I'm going to show you how to improvise the tourniquet looks like. But these are devices that are excellent to use. If you apply it, just remember, never over any joint, not over the knee, not over the elbow, not over the wrist, never over the actual wound site. You might have a partial amputation or a full amputation. So what they're teaching in CERT now is high and tight. So it's a deviation from what I learned as a firefighter and what I learned as CERT when I started teaching like 8-10 years ago. It was always as close to the wound as possible without being directly over it, not over any joints or bone. And the premise, the whole thing was that if I'm putting a tourniquet because I have a partially amputated hand because of some kind of injury, if I put it up here above the wrist, if they need to amputate my hand, I still have this arm, right? The way they're teaching it is high and tight. You put it here. I'm just telling you what they're doing and what I would do personally and what I teach when I go to the Philippines. I don't do high and tight. I do as close to the wound as possible, but with the things in mind. Not directly over the wound, not directly over any joints. We're not going to use rope, wire, or cable of any kind. We're going to hopefully have a combat tourniquet, or we're going to improvise one. So this is a last case resort. It's basically life or death. So when you put one, another thing you want to do is you never remove it. The moment you apply it, it remains in place. It will hurt. That individual is going to be hurting. But guess what? If you don't do that, they're going to bleed to death. So you never remove it. The way you could determine if it stopped the blood, you don't see blood coming out, you could check for what we call circulation, sensation, and movement. Capillary refill, if you pinch your nail bed and you hold it for a couple seconds and you release it, it turns white. If you have normal circulation, it should return to normal pinkish color in 2 seconds or less. And I'm kind of going a little further ahead because it's another thing that you check when you're looking for somebody you suspect is going into shock. But you're going to check that you either stop the blood, that you don't feel a pulse, or they don't have capillary refill, remember 2 seconds or less. If you need to apply another tourniquet, you can apply one directly above the first one. A lot of these tourniquets, as you see them, you mark the date and the time that you applied it. Why do you do that? Because it's important when this individual goes into the emergency room in a medical setting, the physician needs to know how long that tourniquet's been applied. Medical science has advanced so much, they can actually reattach amputated appendages or digits. If you do happen to have a digit that this person lost because of some kind of an accident, put it in a plastic bag. Do not put it directly in contact with ice. You can have maybe a cooler, place a towel over it, and place the digit or that appendage on the towel. And it goes with the patient. Yes, it may seem kind of squirmish, but if you're trying to help somebody and, if you were able to do that and that individual later says, hey man, they were able to reattach my hand, thank you. As opposed to, hey, I lost my hand now, I have no hand. So just keep in mind, if it is, you can use 2 tourniquets. If you can't stop the bleeding completely, you put it never directly over the wound, and you don't put it on any joints. So I think we're going to transition into lunch. There's a lot of material, so a lot more to cover. But if you haven't had a chance to play with it, you guys can put those back. We're going to actually use them later on. We stopped the tourniquet, so I'm just going to go right with the flow and continue. So we talked about stopping bleeding. We talked about arterial being the most concerning because it's under pressure. Red, rich in oxygen. Then you have the venous, which is less pressure. It is still under pressure. Doesn't have oxygenated blood. It's kind of like a dark red, bluish colored blood. And then you have the capillary that's oozing. Less concerning, kind of like a carpet burn if you fell and you scraped up your knee. We talked about direct pressure. We talked about elevation, pressure points. Last case resort is the tourniquets. So we're just going to follow suit here. So these are examples. We talked about it leading the last case that you can. If you have to use a makeshift tourniquet, I'm going to have a video that will show you how you can do that. You have to somehow denote the date and the time that you applied it because it has to be taken in a medical setting by a medical professional, so a doctor. If you remove it, you basically are guaranteeing that person a fatality because it's pretty serious. So medical advancement has progressed so much that, yes, they can reattach some appendages, digits or whatever. So you want to keep that with the patient. You want to put it in, not directly on ice, on a towel. Maybe there's ice there so it's not making direct contact. And you could use 2 tourniquets if one doesn't stop the bleeding. So here's an example of 2 tourniquets, a lower extremity injury. My only criticism of this picture here is anytime you're applying any kind of tourniquet, direct pressure, if you have a ring, you remove it. If you have a watch, you remove it. If you have shoes, you're going to remove it. Why? They're swelling. And you also want to check your toe or your finger to make sure that there's no capillary refill. Remember I said under 2 seconds that you have good circulation? So if it's beyond 2 seconds, it could be a condition that's leading into shock. So this should have had a picture with the individual without a shoe on. We don't use rope, we don't use string or any cable of any kind because it can cause more damage to the tissue. So here's a quick example of the application of a combat tourniquet.
Welcome to the CAT Tourniquet video tutorial, Buddy Aid application to lower extremity. Apply inguinal pressure to the femoral artery. Apply tourniquet proximal to the bleeding site. Route the band around the limb and pass the red tip through the inside slit of the buckle. Pull the band tight. Pass the red tip through the outside slit of the buckle. The friction buckle will lock in place. Pull the band very tight and securely fasten the band back on itself. When the band is pulled tight, no more than 3 fingers will fit between the band and the limb. Twist the rod until bright red bleeding has stopped and the distal pulse is eliminated. Place the rod inside the clip, locking it in place. Check for bleeding and absence of distal pulse. If bleeding is not controlled, consider additional tightening of the tourniquet or the use of a second tourniquet, side by side and proximal to the first, to eliminate the distal pulse. Secure the rod inside the clip with the strap. Prepare the patient for transport and reassess. Record the time of application. For more information about the CAT tourniquet or any NAR products, please visit www.narescue.com or call 888-689-6277.
Okay, so that was a quick and dirty application of the CAT, Combat Application Tourniquet. You guys saw those that we passed around. There might be a situation where you have to improvise. You're going to use your own method and improvise a tourniquet with an individual using a shirt, using a tie, using maybe a scarf. Same things apply. You want to make sure that you secure it. Don't use a pen, don't use a pencil, something that will readily break. You can use like a stick in this case that is pretty hardy, that's not easily broken. And you gotta secure what they call the rod is sometimes referred to as a windlass. You wanna make sure that once you apply it, that you're securing it. And again, you have nothing to write the date and time you put it, especially if this individual is unconscious, consider writing it on the forehead. If you have a Sharpie, yeah, it'll be there for a while, but it'll eventually rub off. The physicians need to know when it was applied, at what time, because it could be many hours past the point where this tourniquet was applied. So here's a quick video of an improvised tourniquet.
Hey, I'm Luke Williams, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create a makeshift tourniquet. Now, this is not to be a replacement for a commercial tourniquet. In fact, a little piece of advice, jump online and grab one of these. You can get them from many retail stores like North American Rescue, and then keep it in your car or your EDC bag at all times. Now, all that being said, if God forbid you do come up on an accident or have an accident and you need a tourniquet and you do not have a commercial one, we're going to show you how to create a makeshift one. For this, you're going to need 3 things: some type of material, a windlass, and a securing mechanism. Now, the first thing you're going to need is some material. Whether it's an old shirt laying around, or if you don't mind losing the shirt off your back, you can cut it into a long strip about 1.5 inches wide. You never want to use anything less than that, because at that point you could create nerve damage, which is going to cause way more harm than good. Some other things you don't want to use are cables, ropes, or zip ties. Some things you can use that are great ideas that may be laying around are neckties or scarves. You want to stay away from belts, and even though it's better than nothing, you're likely not going to be able to get the belt tight enough to stop the bleeding. Next is the windlass. This is the object that helps tighten the material around the limb that you're working on. You want something that's not going to break with pressure, so I'd stay away from items like pens and pencils. Instead, I'd recommend using something like a carabiner, a solid stick, or even a closed pocket knife. And last is your securing mechanism. This is basically to keep your windlass from unwinding. Some of the more common things you'll find laying around are the piece that is below the cap on a soda bottle, a key ring, or even hair ties will work. If you have another piece of string or material, you can simply tie your securing mechanism to your limb and lock in the windlass. All right, guys, as I mentioned, this should never be a replacement for a commercial tourniquet. And in fact, when someone arrives on scene with a commercial tourniquet, you want to replace this one as quick as you can. Now I want to know, who carries a tourniquet with you all the time, and have you ever had to use it? If so, let us know in the comments below, and then make sure you head to Rated Red's YouTube channel and hit subscribe. From the cabin, I'm Luke Williams.
Okay, he said replace, right? That doesn't mean you remove it. You applied an improvised tourniquet, you leave it in place, you apply a combat tourniquet, leave them both in place. So now we're going to talk about different types of injuries. So blunt force trauma. In this picture, a blunt force trauma could be a traffic collision. You hit your chest or upper chest area with the steering wheel, or even the restraining mechanism of the seatbelt itself. Going at 60 miles an hour, not just the car, you and your internal organs are going at 60 plus miles an hour. This is a story probably Pia has heard me tell many times. I was a new firefighter in Pico Rivera. We went on a collision of a sedan, two-door vehicle, into a trailer. Went in there, the driver completely crushed. It's like if you got a Coke can and you stepped on it. You could not see his legs or anything. His girlfriend, young girl, she looked completely fine. And I was the patient person for the guy driving, and he was under the influence of something. I saw a lot of beer bottles expired in the back. So my buddy is looking at her. I already knew. I said, was she wearing a seatbelt? No. She looked perfectly fine. He looked like he was the one in the most severe injury, because literally looked like the car was crushed like a can, like you would crush an empty Coke can. He's asking me, hey, how's my girlfriend? I said, hey, they're working on her, don't worry. You don't want to give, I already knew. So it turns out that inside, she looked perfectly fine exterior. She was like a cracked eggshell. Because the deceleration for whatever the speed was that they hit that trailer, it was so sad. And I don't know what happened to the guy. We'd go on these calls, and I rarely follow up. Once in a while, they'll come to the station and say, hey, thank you. You were there, whatever, which is rare. And, you know, HIPAA laws, we can't ask the nurses, even though we know them, hey, whatever happened to that little kid. Once in a while, it's rare, but it's very refreshing to hear, or somebody comes and says, hey, thank you, you saved my life. But that one is something that will always be etched in my mind. She looked perfectly fine, not a scratch on her. He looked like, whoa. You never know. You never know. So that's an example of blunt force trauma. It could be a bat or somebody striking you with excessive force. Gunshot wounds. They're very, depending on the distance that gunshot wound, the caliber that pistol was shot, the caliber, the area where that was shot, the type of bullet. Because some of these are high force projectiles striking flesh, and it could be breaking into many fragments, interior, causing extensive damage. Or we could have a laceration or a penetration. So, one thing to remember, when you have any kind of laceration or penetration, you leave it in place. You never remove it. So this is a prop that demonstrates lacerations, exit wound, and entrance wound. So I'm going to just pass it around so you can see what it looks like. It's a really good prop that gives you an idea of the damage that the human body can sustain depending on the mechanism of injury. So you got to consider the impact. Quick question. So just funny things that we hear in the course of the career that we've chosen. So we've gone on many types of injuries, stabbing injuries. So what do you guys think if there was some kind of stabbing injury with a sharp knife? What would cause more damage? Somebody stabbing that's male or somebody stabbing that's a female? Anyone want to venture to guess? Okay, that's a good response. Anybody else? Female, because they have thinner skin. I'm saying that the person inflicting the damage is either male or female. Yeah, you would think male, right? More force, more weight behind it. Studies have shown that it's female. The reason being because females, if it's rare that they would do something like that, but usually it's a lot of emotion, passion. So it's not just one, it's boom, 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 boom. A male will usually just one, and that's it. So, yeah, it's kind of weird, right? But yeah, it's just something over the course of my career, one of these weird things that we've come across. And I would have thought a male, much more force, much more strength, more weight behind that. But so this little prop that I'm passing around, it gives you an idea how the damage will look, whether it's a laceration, a bullet entry wound, or an exit wound. Sometimes a gunshot wound, a GSW, will not have an exit wound. What will that tell me? If I know I'm responding to a call, or you see somebody and they're telling you, or somebody's telling you they were shot, there's no exit wound, there's more damage than that bullet's probably ricocheting, doing who knows what. So, an example of a gunshot wound injury. There are high energy injuries that will do extensive damage to tissue and organs. Again, I talked about some of the factors, caliber of the type of weapon, the type of bullet, the distance, the placement of where that gunshot wound in the body. So just remember, anything like that happens, that we're going to be concerned for multiple things. So I'm going to give you another prop. So this is an example of like a leg with an entrance wound and a laceration. So you get an idea what that looks like. This is what we're going to practice our tourniquets and our bandaging. We can practice on each other, but it gives you an idea. And I have another prop there, similar, kind of tubular in shape. But if you do respond to an incident like that, we talked about a tourniquet. There's also dressing that is specially made with special material, and there's two ones, two specially. A Quick Clot is one of the brand names, and what it is, and I have some examples here. So the blue, yeah. Not unless we're going to use it. So we're going to use it later. No, that. Come on, guys. Yeah. So these are, we're hopefully going to use these, but basically what the premise that they work on, depending, there's two popular brands. One of them promotes clotting, and because of its chemical compound, basically what you're seeing, that leg, you're just stuffing it in there. And the other one will form a gel that will stop the bleeding. So remember I talked to you about tourniquets? If you guys are doing a go bag or you're doing some kind of a safety bag, this is another item that I highly recommend, because sometimes you're going to have an injury where you can't place a tourniquet. You can't place a tourniquet anywhere in the head or the neck. So there's just another, technology is advancing. We have these on our fire apparatus and our paramedic units. Just something that for you to think about, that if you're trying to investigate or probably formulate your own go bag or your own medical bag, this is another item you might want to consider putting in it. Okay, so remember we talked about the three killers.
Can we ask some questions regarding the tourniquet? Sure. Okay, so I guess you were just mentioning, so the tourniquet only works if there's injury to the arm or leg, but if anything is happening on your chest or anywhere here, we can't really use the tourniquet, you're saying. Yeah. So how do we stop the bleeding if that happens?
Okay, really good question. Of course, the tourniquet is applicable in one of your appendages, your arm, your legs. If you have an abdominal injury, a stabbing like we saw that picture, you cannot put a tourniquet anywhere near there. So what can you do? You use one of these things that I talked to you about, the Quick Clot, that you would just stuff it in there. Literally, You see that prop that I passed around, that hole, that's pretty deep. You're stuffing that thing in there. And that will hopefully slow or stop the bleeding to the point where that person has an ability to survive, and then they could take it to the emergency room and getting professional care.
So like in movies, like you see people pressing on the wound. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah, that's right. So remember we talked about direct pressure, even in the abdominal area, or you saw that hockey player that had that injury to the neck. They were applying direct pressure. So you could not use a tourniquet on a neck. There's no way to put a tourniquet in the torso. So this clotting factor that we're talking about, this quick clot, is another example of a product that you can use in the event that somebody has one of those type of injuries.
Also adding to what Pastor Sharon said, sometimes like on TV you see that like if there's a gunshot wound, you see someone put their finger in it. Like is that good to do?
Yeah, okay, so the television sometimes will portray things. I'm not here to gore you, I really not, but one of the things and over the course of my career, I was a new firefighter in Oak Park in Ventura County, and a guy self-inflicted gunshot wound. We were CPR all the way to the emergency room. The physician, the ER doctor, knew I was a new fireman. He goes, "Hey kid, you want to come in?" Sure, I didn't want to see it because of the gore, but I wanted to learn. So yeah, they opened him up, cracked the ribs open, and they're massaging his heart. And I'm looking at it, and he goes, "Here, you want to do it?" I go, "Yeah, I wanted to know what it felt like, not because but I was looking at this in real time, and I'm looking at it, and I've seen TV, and this seemed not real, and what I saw on TV seemed real, but it was completely the opposite. So sometimes TV or movies will show you something in a way that is completely different. Like that example that I told you about fires, not true. Yes, to answer your question, you can put direct pressure. You may not be able to see the vessel, but like that prop there, when we're doing that quick clot, you're hopefully identifying where it's bleeding. You're pushing down. It's going to hurt that individual, and you're stuffing that in there. But you're basically you're making it so he can survive. Yeah, you're putting it in there, and it's going to start to, depending on the product, it's going to start to, one, either increase the clotting factor, or two, make that gel, which occludes the bleeding, because there's two major products that are out there, and depending on which one you use. But we do have those props. Pia asked me if we're going to use them. We're going to use them at the end so you can see what it feels like, and feel free. Honey, you want to hold up that other prop, the one that's tubular? Next to the leg, yeah. So we have a couple of props. It's the same thing. It just doesn't look anatomically correct. But I got these because I don't want you just to see a video. I don't want you to apply a tourniquet on somebody because you couldn't really put it. You would hurt that individual. But this is an opportunity for you to see what it looks like, what it feels like, as realistically as possible without it being the real thing. Yeah, but these are really good questions. If you have any other questions, please feel free. Just remember, any kind of impalement in the abdominal area or even the eye. So there's instances where somebody gets impaled with a pencil or something. So what you can do, you can use a cup, cut it open. You're trying to immobilize that area. You're going to put it over the cup. You're going to bandage it up. And guess what? You cover the other eye. Why am I covering the other eye? Because if somebody's coming this way and you're looking like this, you're going to move this eye. Very few people can move one eye and not the other. So if this eye is moving this way and this has got an impaled object in it, your natural reaction would be to move both eyes, potentially causing more damage. So you tell the patient, "Hey, I'm going to have to cover both eyes." You explain. Anytime you're doing any kind of wound care or you're bandaging something or you're doing fracture or splinting that we're going to cover right now, you want to explain what you're doing, because they may, like, I'm not going to let you cover my eye. My natural reaction is I want to see what's going on. You explain to them why, you could potentially lose your good eye if this other eye that's, the eye that's impaled. So I have to do it. But if you explain it to them, they're more likely to let you and have less questioning and maybe less resistance to whatever it is that you're trying to do. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
It might be too much to remember, even no matter what you say, but the one that gels, I would think maybe would be better for an arterial thing because of the squirting thing, because otherwise,
Yeah.
like, and then you know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually. Yeah, so I did a little bit of research. I wish I had more time and I could tell you more conclusively. I could find out. The other one, the Quick Clot, apparently is the better product. That it worked like 90% of the time, and the other one was in the 70% range. Yeah, and we're talking about different types of bleeding. Maybe arterial bleed. It could be venous bleed. You wouldn't put one of these products on the capillary because it's slow. You can probably put direct pressure on a capillary bleed and stop it. So we're not talking about shock. So person going into shock, there's problem with circulation. One of the things that can cause circulation, a cardiogenic shock. There's some issue with the heart. It could be some kind of a medical issue, a blunt trauma to the heart. A person going into cardiogenic shock is because of some heart issue. Hypovolemic shock, that means there's a low, hyper, high. This means that there's low volume. It could be bleeding externally, it could be internal bleeding. So that person, the body will go into shock as a compensatory reaction to the problem that body is sustaining. Anaphylactic shock, it could be an allergic reaction. Many people are allergic to nuts or shellfish, or even bees. So, if they eat something they're allergic to, they can have a severe reaction to it. So that would be an anaphylactic shock. Septic shock due to infections, different kinds of infections that is causing that individual to go into shock. And then one of the more common ones too is a neurogenic shock. There's some kind of damage to the nervous system, either through blunt trauma or some kind of a condition medically. These are examples of shock. But we talked about capillary refill. Just pinch a nail of your bed. It turns white. If you got good circulatory blood going through you, a good circulation, your color should return in 2 seconds or less. So that's one way that you can check somebody that you suspect is going into shock. But guess what? Some people paint their nails. And I say people because it's not just women that paint their nails now. So what do? You pinch the side of the finger. Same thing. You put pressure, it's white, and it returns to pinkish or normal color, depending on your pigmentation, in 2 seconds or less. So that means you got good circulation going through your body. This is an example of capillary refill. It's telling you that if you have good circulation, that your color should return in 2 seconds or less. So, how do we recognize when somebody potentially is going into shock? Remember acronyms? I think they're good. They're easier to remember. I know they are for me. So, respirations. Are they breathing rapid and shallow? So somebody that starts showing signs and symptoms of going into shock are going to have rapid, shallow breathing. Why? The body is compensating for that low or problematic circulation for whatever the reason that they're going into shock. Perfusion, you can check it by capillary refill, or you could check distal. So I know there's terms that maybe you're not familiar with. Distal means furthest from the heart, further away. So if you're checking for a pulse and you check the radial pulse and you don't feel anything, it could be a sign that that person is going into shock. Mental status. So, a third way you find out if somebody potentially is going into shock, you tried both these two, and you go to the individual and say, ma'am, what's your name? Most people will be able to respond. Now, I'm not going to ask her, hey, what's the square root of pi? She might be a mathematician. She might actually be able to spurt it out, but I know I can't. So you ask them simple questions. So what we call, when we're doing a CERT, we do what's called we do triage. Triage means is that you're prioritizing patients when you have a mass casualty incident. And the acronym, this is kind of going off script here, 32 can do. So you count respirations. If they're above 30, boom, something's bad. 2, capillary refill in 2 seconds or less, good. Can do, can follow simple commands. What's your name? So that's a quick assessment. When we have the train derailment in Hollywood a few years back, and we had hundreds of potential victims, and we had to implement a quick assessment of multiple victims to prioritize the victims that we need to get into immediate care, delayed care, and minor care. So just to give you a quick recap, RPMs, respirations, are they rapid and shallow? You assess that. If they're rapid and shallow, boom, you're gonna suspect shock. You don't necessarily need to go through the same. But if they're okay, then you're gonna do capillary refill. If it's longer than 2 seconds, something's happening, something's not right. And if you need to go through the third assessment, hey, can you squeeze my hands? What's your name? Something simple. If you're gonna go through the trouble of asking somebody, can you squeeze my hand? So, for example, David, squeeze both my hands, both. Okay. Why did I ask him to squeeze both my hands? Because if he has some kind of head injury, or he's taken some kind of drugs, if he's squeezing really tight with his right hand and not with his left, it could be an indication of some kind of head injury. It could be indication of some kind of drug he's taken, or it can be indication he's really young, but it's even at his age, it's possible, very remote, mostly older people, it could be a stroke. So if you're gonna do that, have them do both hands. You know, have them, hey, can you squeeze both my hands? And that way you're assessing if there's something else going on. But he should be able to follow something simple like that. So some of the other signs and symptoms, the individual going into shock is gonna be cool and clammy. They're gonna be pale, they're gonna look like they're ashen in color, potentially going blue. The pulse is gonna be rapid breathing. They're gonna feel nauseous and like they're vomiting. They're gonna have pupils that are enlarged. You look at their pupils, and some individuals it's easier when the color's lighter. That's why another thing, and I didn't have one with me, a pin light, if you can check somebody's pupils, you don't flash the light directly at them, you go through the side. And you could see their pupils. As soon as light hits, it should constrict, because there's too much light going in there. When you walk into a dark room, your body's trying to get as much light in, they get big, okay? And the weakness or fatigue. So what do we do if we're treating for somebody going into shock? We're gonna lay the victim on their back. We're gonna elevate their legs anywhere from 6 to 12 inches. We're gonna make sure they have a patent airway. How do we do that? Remember that the major obstruction in an airway is the tongue. So we do a head tilt, chin lift maneuver. We have them with an open airway. We're gonna control any kind of obvious signs of bleeding. If it's internal bleeding, we can't see it. We can't do anything about internal bleeding, but any obvious signs of external bleeding, we're gonna take measures to stop that bleeding. We're gonna maintain their body temperature. So the body is such an amazing thing. What the body's trying to do is to bring blood to the major organs, your lungs, your heart, and your brain. So it's taking blood from the biggest organ in your body, your skin. So that's the reason where people start to shiver, because the blood is being pulled into the major organs because the body is compensating. And that's one of the things, you want to maintain that person hot. as much as possible, put them in a thermal blanket or some kind of covering. And you do not ever want to give somebody something to eat or drink. Why? If they become unconscious, they could eventually aspirate. They could vomit even though they're unconscious, and they could aspirate it back into their lungs. Now you have another big problem. So you want to make sure you're monitoring this patient. Here's going to be another quick video of addressing a person going into shock.
Hi, Captain Wayne Bennett here with another quick first aid tip for my One and Done series, teaching you how to save lives in 1 minute. Today's first aid skill is how to treat shock. Since shock is one of the 3 things that you can die from, immediate treatment must be given. So call 911 immediately, get the paramedics on the way. So now what? We've called 911. Most folks are unsure and confused about what to do in the case of shock. So we're going to give you some quick, simple tips that can make a huge difference in your patient's survival. So what is shock and what can we do about it? Shock is a blood flow problem. Quite simply put, a lack of blood flow to the brain. This can be dangerous because brain cells can only live 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. So the body immediately goes into survival mode. In order for the body to survive, the body has to get more blood to the vital organs. So it begins compensating by taking blood from one organ and giving it to another. It starts by taking blood from the largest organ on the body, the skin. Now that's the good news because the skin cells can live hours without blood flow. But that's also why your patient's going to get cold and pale. The early signs of shock can be anxiety, feeling restless, apprehensive. Then the skin goes cool, pale, clammy, your heart rate increases, breathing becomes rapid, but it becomes very serious when the victim becomes unconscious or unresponsive. Your job is to interrupt or delay the shutdown process by simply placing the victim in the shock position, which is lying the victim down and elevating their feet 6 inches for a child and 12 inches for the adults. This will allow blood from the legs to flow back into the core where all the vital organs are. But your work doesn't stop there. Remember how cold the skin was? Well, we have to cover them up quickly with a blanket. Blood will be sent away from the vital organs and back out to warm up the skin. So use a thermal blanket. It's a bright and shiny surface. It reflects 90% of the victim's heat right back to them. This 6x7 foil blanket will keep the victim nice and toasty, driving blood flow back into the core where it's needed. And one last tip, never leave an unconscious shock victim alone on their back. You must put them in the recovery position on their left side. Of course, that's a great idea for another video. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe below.
Okay, so that was just a quick video just talking about
Did you
the
know
same
that
stuff that I just mentioned to you. So just to recap, 3 killers: airway obstruction, uncontrolled bleeding, person going into shock. We're going to do an open airway. Remember, A, B, C. Just remember A, B, C. A comes before B, B comes before C. If you remember that sequence, make sure they have a patent airway. Head, tail, chin lift, because the most obstruction is caused by the tongue itself. You're going to control bleeding, direct pressure, elevation, pressure points, and last case result, tourniquet. But then again, we have these other products now, the quick clot being one of them, that you can incorporate in areas where you cannot apply a tourniquet. Signs and symptoms of shock, we just talked about that. Rapid respirations, nausea, mental status, cool and clammy. We're going to treat for shock. We're going to elevate the legs. We're going to lay them flat. Make sure they have a patent airway. You don't want to leave a patient that is going into shock unattended. If at all possible, you stay with them, because if they start to go into a worsening condition, then maybe we would progress to possibly what we're going to do in a little bit, which is CPR. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up into the last PowerPoint, which is a little shorter, and then we're going to practice all the stuff that we covered. Okay, so this is continuing on with the medical. So you may encounter a situation where you have somebody with a fracture, a suspected fracture. You're gonna splint. What does splint mean? You're basically immobilizing the appendage, because you're gonna see somebody, you suspect it's a fracture. Sometimes the obvious fracture, you can see the bone protruding outside the skin, and sometimes you're not sure. always err in the side of safety. So we're going to splint. We're going to show you how to do some of that. So there's the difference between dressing and bandage. I mentioned that earlier. Bandaging, dressing, we have those here. Sometimes you have to improvise because you don't have access to these items. Rules of dressing. We always apply direct pressure, and if it's continually bleeding, we're going to apply more direct pressure. And we never remove any kind of dressing because there's a clotting factor that's already starting. If you have soiled dressing, just apply a secondary dressing on top of that. If you try to remove it, you could already start pulling potential clotting and get a worse situation. So you want to make sure you redress. If only for an infection and it's not bleeding, that you can remove dressing and reapply clean dressing. But that's different than the bleeding. Remember? So we talked about the bleeding. You apply dressing to bleeding, you maintain that dressing and reapply clean dressing over that initial dressing. We talked about amputations, just the example here. An amputation, put it in a plastic bag, he's a cooler, it has ice, lay a towel or something over it, and then place that appendage or that digit on top of the towel, not directly in contact with ice. Impaled objects, we don't remove them, we keep them in place, we try to immobilize them, dress and pad around it. You keep that person in as comfortable a position as they can. In most cases, they may already be in a position, what we call position of comfort. Especially any kind of evisceration would be some cut that's, the contents are starting to spill out. When you encounter patients like that, they're gonna look like they're in the fetal position. Why? They're drawing their legs up, they're on the ground. It's less pressure. If you extend your legs when any kind of evisceration, it adds more pressure because the muscles tighten, which is worsening the injury and the pain that person is having. We're not going to remove it. We're going to control bleeding. We're going to clean and dress the wound and immobilize it as much as possible. Different fractures. Here's an example of an open fracture. Where you see the bone break the skin. Again, the fracture could be inside and there is no breaking of the skin, but they have a fracture or you suspect there is a fracture. If you're in doubt, always act in the side of safety. Displaced and non-displaced fractures. Fracture could, doesn't mean that the bone is completely off of alignment. In this case, there's a fracture right there. You can't see it. It's inside the body. And even this displaced fracture, it's not protruding or exposing or breaking through the skin. So these are just two different examples of two different types of fractures. Now, this is how we do our splinting. The most used material for splinting is cardboard. Sometimes you actually have these splinting devices that are already cut in the shape of an elbow that you can maneuver, or a leg in this case. Bearing in mind, we're immobilizing, say the fracture's right here, you want to support both sides. You wouldn't want to have this hand dangling over the edge. You want to make sure that that's supported. They're placing some either dressing or a towel. Our bodies aren't completely straight. We have different curvatures, muscle and bone. So if they're going to be in a splint for a prolonged period of time, make it as comfortable as you can. Place some kind of soft material on the flat side of the splint. When we treat an open fracture, we don't push the bones back. We don't manipulate them. We do not irrigate them. We cover lightly to prevent, that's to help prevent infection. We can place some moist dressing over the bone and it has to be sterile. So if you have sterile saline, yeah. If you have what is, a water bottle that hasn't been opened, maybe you can do that, but I wouldn't use tap water or anything because now you're introducing potential for infection. And you treat all suspected fractures like they are, because you don't know. We don't have x-ray vision. When we're going to use splinting, we're going to use materials. Try not to use metal. If people have like metal pipe and they're using it as a splint, if that's the only thing you have and that's the only thing available, maybe, but try to use something that it can be taken into the x-ray, because when they get to the emergency room, they're going to put them in an x-ray and they're going to keep the splint on. And if it's metal, they can't put it in the x-ray. Just something to think about. We talked about capillary refill. So when we do splinting, when we do any kind of immobilizing of any item, remember I told you if they have a watch or they have jewelry, bracelet, remove it. If the person is unconscious and there's other people around you, we always tell people what you're doing. She might be seeing me take his watch off. For all she knows, he's stealing his watch. Hey, I'm removing his watch and putting it in his pocket because he could potentially start to swell, and it would be very difficult to remove that ring or that watch. CSM, again, another acronym, circulation, motor, and sensation. When we splint, we're going to check circulation, capillary refill, 2 seconds or less, good. We're going to check for sensation. So I'm going to go to her and I'm going to say, and I'm going to cover it, which finger am I touching? Yeah, see? Always go for the thumb or the pinky. Don't try to do one of these middle ones, because, you know, and you want to cover it. If she's looking at me, you know, you want to make sure she can feel. Why? There might be nerve damage. You want to make sure that she can actually feel it, not, oh, I'm seeing you touch my thumb, it's my thumb. So you can touch one of the two, but cover it so she's not seeing what you're touching. You just want to make sure she has feeling, because that's going to tell you you're assessing before you immobilize, and as soon as you splint and immobilize it, you're doing it again. Why? We're trying to make the situation better. If something you did could have potentially compromised some nerve endings or something, and it's going to tell you, whoa, wait a minute. She felt everything. She moved her fingers and all that. Now she can't. Was it something I did? Maybe. Or maybe there was damage that was already occurring. But it gives you a starting point and an ending point after you did splinting. Okay, this is a quick video, and it's just going to go recapping exactly the same stuff we talked about.
All right, let's talk about circulation, motor sensation, or CMS. Has to be done before and after a splint is put on our patient. A splint could be simply splinting her forearm, putting on a sling and swath, or even putting a patient in a KED or on a backboard. Has to be done. If you're doing a backboard or KED, we have to do all 4 extremities. If you're just splinting one extremity, you'll only need to focus on the circulation, motor, and sensation for that extremity before and after the splint. To do that for upper arm, I would check her pulse at her radial artery, making sure that it is present. Ma'am, can you wiggle your fingers? That's checking our motor sensation. And then saying, ma'am, which finger am I touching? Pinky. Which just means that she can feel me touching her until her sensation is intact. If I was to do her leg, lower leg, maybe even the upper leg, I need to check a pulse on the top of her foot, which would be a dorsalis pedis pulse. I can ask her to push down and pull up with my hands to assess motor function, and ask her to tell me which toe I'm touching.
Okay, that was quick and dirty, really easy. If you can't feel a pulse, these distal pulses, when I mean distal, furthest from the heart, and you try to get a pedal pulse on somebody, even myself, when I try to feel mine, it's really hard. So forego that. Just do capillary refill. Boom. Press the nail bed. If they have their toes painted, you know, press the side of the toe. Okay? So just really quick way you're assessing it before, you're assessing it after you splint it, because you want to make sure that that person didn't get worse. You're there to make it better. Okay, there's sprains, and basically an overstretched, torn, or twisted ligament. Ligament is a tough band of fibrous tissue that connects bones to bones. Sprains can be very painful. It could happen when you're walking down the stairs. It usually happens in, ankles. It could happen in knees as well. You're going to see pain, swelling, bruising, and it's going to be limited mobility. And sometimes the person that has sprained something will feel or hear a popping. Strain, similar. This is an overstretched, torn, or twisted tendon, which is a cord of fibrous tissue that connects muscles to bone. So, similar, pain, tender, swelling, bruising. They didn't feel a pop. There seems to be muscle weakness, but there's also limited range of motion. We don't know if it's a sprain. We don't know if it's a strain. We don't know if it's a fracture. What are you going to do? You're going to treat it like it's a fracture. Same thing. You're going to mobilize it by splinting, and you're going to do CMS before and CMS after. When you do have some kind of sprain or strain, RICE, another acronym, you basically want to rest that body part for a couple of days. You're going to apply ice, not directly on the skin. You're going to place some kind of a cloth, a t-shirt, over that area. You're going to apply it for 15 to 20 minutes every 3 to 2 hours. Okay? So RICE, rest, ice, compress. You can use a tubular bandage, or you can use some of the one, like example, one of these lactis bandage to compress that area carefully, because that helps reduce the swelling. And the last one is you're going to elevate. You're going to elevate that body part because it also helps reduce the swelling. This is for a potential sprain or strain that you suspect. Okay, we can try that one. It's going to be pretty quick. We're almost there, folks. We're getting close. Then we can do our hands-on stuff.
Strains and sprains are painful injuries to muscles, tendons, and ligaments. They are common workplace and sports injuries that are usually caused by three things: overuse, improper technique, and lack of conditioning. Here's how they occur. Sprains are caused when a joint is forced to move into an unnatural position. For example, twisting your ankle causes a sprain to the ligaments around the ankle as the joint is overstretched out of position. Strains can occur when muscles are pulled, twisted, or torn. When someone tries to lift something before warming up the muscle, the sudden pull on a cold muscle can cause a strain. So how do we avoid strains and sprains? Wear protective footwear to reduce stress on your ankle, foot, and leg joints. Make sure your shoes fit your feet properly. Avoid high-heeled shoes. The higher the heel, the more susceptible you are to a sprain. Avoid activities for which you have not trained. Always warm up and stretch before doing work, exercise, or sports. Do a proper warm-up. Stretch and warm up your muscles before lifting. Slowly move the joints around and get them warmed up. Have good flexibility by gently stretching muscles and joints before subjecting them to stress. Stack your joints. Properly align your arm and your legs. Twisting your limbs under load causes strains and sprains. When you feel pain, lay off. Pain is your body's way of telling you that it needs to rest. Remind yourself to always use good posture. Poor posture strains your lower back muscles. Lift according to good lifting rules, like never lift and twist. Decrease the distance you must stretch to lift a heavy object. Get help when it might be too heavy. And finally, know your body's limits and stick to them. Thanks for watching and have a safe day.
Another potential injury is a dislocation, typical dislocation of the shoulder. So we have a triangular bandage that we would do, basically immobilizing that shoulder, keeping it high and tight. We're going to go over that in a couple minutes here. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to check for CMS before and after, and you're going to try to support that, that sling. And another thing that you can do once you place that triangular bandage, the sling on that individual, you can also bandage it because you're trying to keep it tight. You're trying to keep it so that there's limited movement. Splinting, we can use, like I said, cardboard, but hey, Sometimes you don't have access to cardboard, let alone these already pre-cut splinting devices. You can use a pillow, or you can use a towel. You can use magazines. You don't really see newspapers anymore, but you can use rolled up newspaper or something of that sort. You have to sometimes improvise and use what you have around you. We talked about splinting. Again, we could use hard materials. We're going to try to prevent using any kind of metal material, because then you can't stick that body part into an x-ray. You could also use anatomical splinting. So if you have one fractured finger, you could use the other finger as a splint. Similar thing with the leg. You have this individual here, and they're using the other leg as a splint. Now, when you see these little crevices in between the two fingers, you might want to consider placing some cotton or something, especially in the leg, because if they're going to be splinted for a prolonged period of time, they're going to start to feel discomfort. So you're trying to make it as comfortable as you possibly can. Again, we're going to support the injury above and below. We're going to assess CMS, circulation, motor, and sensation. We're going to splint in the position we found it. We never try to realign bones or fill voids. We're going to fill voids to stabilize and immobilize. And we're going to splint above and below the injury and do CMS again after we splint. Just another quick thing, it's kind of like the capillary refill. If you're trying to set circulation, besides doing the nail bed of the toe or the finger, you could do this Blanche test, but we're just going to pass this. We're not going to do that. We're going to, again, we talked about checking before and after. We're going to do the CMS, circulation, motor, and sensation. And we're going to ask the patient if they feel better, if anything that you're doing is making it less painful, or at least not making it worse. Okay, so I kind of rushed through that because I want to be cognizant of the time. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, so okay, good question. So the scenario is that somebody with a head injury, and of course you want to initiate 911 right away. So hopefully you have your cell phone. Most of us do. We can call right then and there. Or if you don't have one, you can say, "Hey, sir, call 911 and come back." You want to make sure they called and what was said. Anybody with a head injury, you're going to just monitor them. You really can't do a whole lot if they're unconscious. Now, you're going to see if they stop breathing. If they stop breathing, you could take their pulse. Then you could do the jaw thrust maneuver to open up the airway. But you do not want to do the head tilt and chin lift if you know or you highly suspect they have a head injury, because you can make that injury worse by moving the cervical spine in the back. Yeah, so if they get up, they could be under the influence of alcohol, drugs. So you can highly suspect, you see a big old noggin on their head, they fell off this ladder and they're moving around. Sometimes we come across patients that are intoxicated or under some kind of a drug. We can't physically restrain them. You can ask them, "Sir, if there's a spouse, maybe they can do it." The problem is that if these people become combative, then first of all, you don't want to get in an altercation with anybody, but you also can't physically restrain them. So yeah, but there is what's called the Good Samaritan law. So if you come across an individual car accident, somebody unconscious, and you want to render assistance, the Good Samaritan law will cover you if you're doing something that you're trained in. So if you never had CPR, you're trying to do CPR, and you do CPR on the throat for whatever reason, you could be liable because that's negligent. But if you're doing something you're trained in and you did in good faith try to render care, you're protected by what's called the Good Samaritan law. Yeah, is there any Anybody else? Any other questions?
Well, just kind of going way back, but that clotting, instant clot or whatever it's called. Quick clot. What do you, like if you go in a drugstore, what do you ask for?
The one I bought online. There's different businesses that will carry them. But yeah, if you want to send me an email, I can send you a couple of links, or if you wanted to purchase that. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's a brand. There's two of them. You know, like Kleenex. A lot of people Kleenex is tissue, but everybody knows Kleenex. So these are two of the major brands that are out there. I can send you. I believe you can't just go into a drugstore and purchase it, but I've never tried. The ones that I purchased, I went online and got. But yeah, send me an email and I'll send you some links. Yeah.
Why do we have to put people on their left side if they're going into shock and they're vomiting or something? Why does the left matter?
Okay, so good question. Something I didn't cover. David, I'm going to borrow you, please. Honey, I need you here too. So David, could you be our patient? You're lying on the ground. So you can hold it. So we come across a patient, no obvious signs of head, neck, or back injury. They're unconscious. We don't know why. There is a pulse, and you have to leave for whatever reason to get a defibrillator, call 911. We're going to place David in what's called a recovery position. So the recovery position is somebody that's unconscious, that either is intoxicated and possibly drugs, that you want to place them in a way that if they aspirate, it doesn't go back into their airway. So what I'm going to do is do what's called a recovery position for him. The preferred point of placing them is on the left, what's called left lateral, left side. And when we talk left and right, it's his left, not mine. So when I'm looking at him, his left is over here. So I've determined, remember, situational awareness, scene safety, I am not in any danger. I've assessed everything. I suspect he's down because he's intoxicated. I smell alcohol in his breath. So I'm going to get over here. If I have a choice, I'm going to prefer to put him on what's called left lateral, his left side. So, David. So I'm going to move this hand up this way. I'm going to bring this hand over here. So he's unconscious. He's not really trying to fight me or anything. I'm going to lift this leg, bend it. No, you just like, and then I'm going to push him this way, pull him this way. Now I'm going to place his hand right here, this, and I'm going to put this leg here. So if I have to leave, and if he starts to aspirate, it's going to fall to the left side. If because there's the wall, there's an obstruction, I can't do it, I'll do it on the other side, but the preferred side is the left lateral. So this is what's called the recovery position. Are you recovered? Thanks, David. So yeah. So I don't remember the exact things, but the way your body is constructed, that it's less likely that you aspirate on the left side than the right side. It has something to do with the way your body is made, but I forget. But yeah, good question. Anybody have any other questions?
So you said if you suspect a head injury, then you do not lift the neck to open up the airway, or no, lift the head to open up the airway. But you have to kind of assess at the same time too. You may have to in a certain situation, right? And kind of take that, judgment.
Okay, so Tracy said that we suspect a head, neck, or back injury, so there's some kind of injury that if we manipulate the body, we can make it worse. But he's not breathing. So now you have to make a decision. Do I not try to make it worse for a potential cervical injury? Or he's going to die because he's not breathing? So it's your call. So my advice to you, if it's a family member, a loved one, you're going to do it. You're going to do whatever it takes. If it's a stranger, I say this cautiously because people sue in California for anything and everything. So if you did do it and they sued you for whatever, you do have the Good Samaritan law. But again, if they really want to make an issue of it, I know the training that we do through CERT, there's a situation, and it's a physician saying it on video. If you suspect there's a head, neck, or back injury, and this individual's not breathing, his call was, I'm going to do the head tilt chin lift, because if I don't do anything, he's an obvious casualty, obvious. But at least I gave him a fighting chance. So hopefully that answers your question, because I don't want to tell, yeah, you got to do it, da, da, da. I'm telling you, you have to use a judgment call. If you did do it, this is what could protect you. But again, people in California will sue because you sneezed in front of them. So, I mean, yeah. So any other questions? So, okay, now it's going to get, where we can actually start doing stuff.